It looks like a question, right?
That's a question.
Yep.
So we got told that the curriculum would change again for us in 2022. Is that true?
So look, not quite. There is a New South Wales curriculum review that was just completed by a guy called Jeff Masters, Professor Jeff Masters, and a whole curriculum team. They made a bunch of recommendations about what they think the curriculum should look like for the future. Now, they had a whole lot of really, quite, not radical, but certainly very innovative, quite ambitious proposals. And then some that were less ambitious that were just, we need to tweak this and improve this. Now, the government just responded with that, okay? And the government responded basically saying that, yeah, they'll take on some of the recommendations and make some changes. Now, those changes, though, will only begin in 2022, and they will begin in 2022 for K to 2. So you guys are safe, right?
I just got worried for
like I feel you on that. Yeah, it's like I think everyone's a little worried about it, to be honest. So they will be making changes for the year 11 and 12 one, but they will begin in 2024. So you guys will be graduated by then, okay? So that's the good news. The changes won't impact you. You will be on this new curriculum, right? There's a new one coming, but you'll be on this current one. But yes, so it means if you're in year 8 right now, your HSC would be this, if they actually go along timing. And in the past, they haven't often stuck to the timing that they've allocated anyway. So that remains to be seen. If you're in year 8, so if you've got younger siblings, you can laugh at them and say, hey, sucked in guys, year 8, you're going to have a whole new curriculum to deal with. But for now, nah, all good. Cool question. You're on top of it. That only just came out like a week ago. Awesome. Any other questions before we dive in? Cool. Let's jump in and talk a little bit about this new curriculum, okay, guys, and what it is. And I guess, look, part of this, and this links to your question a little bit, to what's the time frame? What are we talking about here? And so I've mapped it out for you guys. And note, in the workbook as well, I've also included this for you. So do you all have the workbook in front of you, which I think Daniel would have shared via email? It's the Google Doc. Did that come through?
Yeah.
Is there thumbs up? Am I seeing thumbs up for people, or are people madly scrambling to find it right now? Yeah, okay, cool. We've got some thumbs up happening. Great. So, where we sort of at the moment, right, is we're on page 3 where it sort of talks about time frame, okay? And so I think the key thing here is that 2019, all of, the science, English, humanities syllabus were rolled out. 2020, this year, we're seeing maths, advanced and extension. They were a little slow to get rolled out. You guys will then have next year, year 11, and then the year after you will set this curriculum as part of 2020. The good news is you'll have 3 years of past papers there for science, English, humanities, and maths standard. You'll only have 2 years of past papers if you're doing advanced extension or 4-unit maths, okay? So just want to frame that. That's a little bit of like the context that we're in. Now, why change the curriculum? I want to share that with you because it actually should frame how you think about going into years 11 and 12 more broadly, and even some of the things that you start to work on during year 10 now, okay? And so there are 4 big reasons, okay, why the syllabus was changed. Number 1 was it was criticism, it wasn't applicable to real life. It's arguable that it still is, even with the new changes. And that's why they're trying to redo it again for 2024. Because the thought is it hasn't done enough. Secondly, there's been a bigger focus on acquisition of deep knowledge, and we're going to see that when we look at the changes to specific subjects. Designed to help you do more skills, and so we're also going to see that because that complicates some of the subjects that have a much bigger skills focus, and it means that there's some challenges for you with how assessments might connect with end-of-year exams and trials and external HSC. And the big thing is it's designed to make the exams less predictable, so harder to prepare for if you don't have strong fundamentals and strong underlying skills, which is where year 10 can actually be really useful to actually sort of build some of those foundational stuff you get in year 11 round goals. So they're the 4 sort of big reasons, right?
Lost his audio.
He's muted.
me now?
Yeah.
Amazing. I have a slightly sensitive headphone jack, and I accidentally, in my enthusiasm, hit the headphone jack. I'll try to avoid doing that. So we have a couple of assessment changes that have occurred. There's only going to be 3 assessments that you guys will sit in year 11, and you'll have 4 in year 12. Now, there are some implications of this. Any ideas? Is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? What do you think?
I think it's a good thing. I thought there was 4 assessments in year 11, and I was wondering how I could do that in 3 terms.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. They've definitely cut it back. Now, what's the negative in this?
If you fail really badly in one of your assessments, you don't have that much assessments or weight to catch that back up.
Yeah, cool, right? So we've got less assessments, so the stress is going to be maybe a little less because, you don't have another one to squeeze in. But yeah, they're worth more. I think that's ultimately it, okay? They're worth more per assessment type. And so that's the sort of big implication, which is why, again, depending on your sort of subject selection and how many units you're doing and major works, this starts to become, again, a little bit of a relevant consideration. So I want you to hold this in your mind for now. When we get into workload, this is going to be something that we want to come back and we want to revisit. Okay, cool. So in terms of, next, I want to dive in and look at English because is anyone here trying to work out whether or not they should take standard or advanced English? Or is everyone like, I know what I'm taking, like I'm taking standard English or I'm taking advanced English?
I'm pretty sure I'm taking advanced English.
Cool. So Tarun, you're pretty sure. Great. What about everyone else? Just, again, I want to make this interactive. So it's not something that I'm just like, cool, here's the information. I'm going to share it with you regardless. What's everyone else thinking about for English at the moment?
I'm thinking about doing advanced English as well.
Cool. Awesome, Olivia. Great. Drew, what about you?
I'm thinking of doing Extension 1 English with Advanced as a fallback.
Cool. Awesome. Although you would do, so you would do Advanced if you did Extension 1, but as in you may just do Extension. Sorry, you may just take Advanced, but you may also top up and take Extension 1. Cool. Great. Excellent. I can't see everyone else here, so I don't want to feel like I'm missing people, but who else is on here? I think I saw Ariane. What about you?
So for us, English Advanced is compulsory. We can't drop to standard. So yeah.
So you're stuck. Okay, great. Yeah. Cool. And who else is on that I've missed?
I'm pretty sure that I'm going to take advanced English.
Cool. Is that Mia, by the way?
Chloe.
Chloe, sorry, as I said, I can't see. I'm just going
right.
for guesses. Okay, cool. So most of us are taking advanced. Is anyone thinking about standard? Because then I just want to talk about standard English. It makes my life easier.
I think I'm going to do standard.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, I'll talk about it then. Cool, guys. So let's just take a quick look, and this will be useful for you to think about anyway, so that you know what you're coming into for next year regardless, right? So what I've got together here is this is what year 11 is going to look like for English, right? So standard or advanced, they look pretty similar, actually. You do the same common module. Module A and Module B start to change a little bit in that, Module A in advanced, both in year 11 and year 12, you'll actually look at 2 texts in Mod A rather than just 1 in standard. And then when we look at, Mod B, in both cases, you're studying a singular text. It's just the level of analysis you're expected to do is higher in advanced than it is in standard. Now, I think the big thing here is that in year 11, generally, there are no prescribed texts. So your school will pick whatever text you guys do. Okay, there's not like the HSC is mandated. That will change when we get into year 12, right? So when we get into year 12, things start looking a little differently. So for English Advanced, you're going to have to do 4 prescribed texts because you're going to do 2 texts in Module A, 1 text in Common Module, 1 text in Module B. So that's 4. Okay, where in English Standard, you only have to do 3 because you only do a singular text in Module A. So Module A becomes one of the most difficult modules, guys, just as prep for you as you go into years 11 and year 12 in advanced English, because you have to do 2 texts. You've got to do a comparison of them. It's quite a complex module in terms of what's required of you. You've got to talk about like the dialogue and the conversation that these 2 texts have, and they've been written at different times. And you've just got more work. Okay, so just flagging that. Now, the other big thing here is that advanced, you must do a Shakespeare. where standard you don't do a Shakespeare. They won't give you a Shakespeare. So if you desperately hate Shakespeare or you really, really struggle with it, something to consider, right, in terms of whether or not you decide to push into advanced. And we'll talk about scaling implications about this a little later, because there are also some significant scaling implications that can occur in the differences between standard and advanced. So again, what I want to flag for you, and this is a little bit more about just what you should expect for advanced English, is that the new syllabus has definitely brought some challenges, and I want to share some thoughts with you about what this might therefore mean for you in terms of year 10, right? So number one, if we jump back really quickly, you'll need to do a related text for texting human experience. You'll need that related text in your assessment internally at school, but you won't need it in your external HSC exam. And the problem with that is it means that you'll do it in school and you think, you'll half your essay or half your multimodal will be on this related text. And then you'll get to your trials and like, yep, I'm ready. And then discover, oh crap, I can't use this related text anymore. And you have to go back and actually complete out all this extra work on your core text. So the point that I'm trying to highlight here is that often actually it means that the related texts and the way the assessments work internally won't always prep you, right, for your external trial, or your internal trial and your external HSC. And that's something that's not just here. We're going to see that in the sciences as well as one of the challenges of the new syllabus. Now, Module C is a new module. And so you're going to, as part of Module C, both in Year 11 and Year 12, they're going to give you a lot of short texts to read. So you're actually going to have to be more widely read than you would have been if you were in prior years, right? Where you could have just last minute checked Spark Notes, lit charts, whatever it is, and got through it. They are expecting you to read a lot more widely. And so a good thing to even do in Year 10 is to start, just trying to push your reading if you're inclined to take advanced or extension 1 English, so that you're just building out, and you could even do that for some of the, the sort of Mod C texts, because they are prescribed already. And you can go and see them, and you could even start just reading some of them. Some of them are pretty enjoyable if you were wanting to push ahead, particularly in term 4, because let's be honest, you're probably not going to be doing anything in term 4 at school anyway. And so that can just be a good thing to start getting a little bit of a leap on for the long term. Now, less cosmetic fixes. So when I went through in the prior HSCs, guys, you could really get away with English, last minute, getting a tutor to come in and like polish your essay and just finalize it and then rote learn it and just, regurgitate it in the exam. The changes have been pretty significant. The types of questions that they're now giving are very specific. So, they might be asking you to talk about a particular idea and the particular sort of techniques. They might be talking about, explore how, the use of mise en scène, right, or the use of tone, for example, communicate ideas about, isolation, right? And that's what you would need to talk about. So you might have had that prepped essay that was like this general essay that you'd written, and then you go in and you're like, what the hell? How do I do that? So the point is that they've done that specifically to try to reduce the rote learning element of like rote memorizing essays and regurgitating. So again, a good skill to work on this year is really strong fundamentals of writing. Like make sure that you can nail essay writing, the core fundamentals. Make sure that you can start developing that imaginative and discursive writing skills. And there's a bigger focus on presentation skills. You will in Years 11 and Year 12 have a multimodal assessment, which will require you to deliver, in most cases, some form of a presentation. So if you're not confident right now, guys, in presenting, again, Year 10 is a really good time to just start doing more, practice putting your hand up for whatever opportunity you can to practice getting confident with your ability to give oral presentations. Because it's not just in English, it's going to be in some of your other subjects as well, where you'll see that that's becoming more of the norm. So any questions so far about the changes for English and what the new syllabus looks like before I sort of keep on moving? Because I want to dive in and talk a little bit more about maths, the changes to maths, and what you can expect.
No, not really for me.
Cool, great. Anyone else have anything that you want to know more about English, what you're getting yourself into, whether or not you should take extension or advanced? Like this is part of the conversation, right, that I'd like to have. Any
Where
questions
can
on
I
English?
find the text for module C?
Great. So if you jump in and you type HSC English, like prescribed text or text prescriptions, they'll give you basically like it's a PDF with like a number of pages, okay? And in there, it'll have all of the Year 12 prescribed text, and it should also break it down for each of the modules and then across standard and advanced. And if you do that, and I'll just do a quick search to see if I can also find it by doing that same Google search now that I'm recommending, HSC English, because I did it the other day, but let's just double check. So yeah, it comes up, it's called English Stage 6 Prescriptions. It should be your first, the first link that comes up, and it'll say HSC 2019 to 2023, NESA. And then we jump, it's a 41-page document, so don't get too freaked out, right? But when you go in, you can then say, oh yeah, I'm gonna do English Advanced, and then it's got the modules, right, for A, B, and C. And then it also has your modules for Common Module as well, which is on page 10. So you can jump in and take a look at that. Does that make sense? Is anyone Googling that with me and has found the doc okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I found it.
Cool, amazing, right?
I have a question now.
Yep, go for it.
So with regard to scaling, which one would go better? Like, I've heard that like standard English is a bit easier to do, but in terms of scaling, you can't get a high ATAR. Whereas advanced and extension are better for those higher ATARs.
Yeah, good question, Tarun. So I do want to dive into this a little later because I've actually got a whole lot of data that I want to show you that explicitly looks at this. What I will say for now, and then we will 100% answer this question, is that there are scaling implications for standard and advanced. Okay, there are definite distinctions, and it will depend on how, it's weird, it's almost like how badly you think you're going to go in either one of them is actually more of the differentiator in how you should make the decision. So hold that thought. I will come and answer that in a whole lot of detail when we look at scaling. Cool. Any other questions at the moment, guys, for English?
I have a question actually. The module, like module ABC, is it like content you do? Is it like different terms for year 11 or?
Yeah, so for year 11, yes, right? Year 11, it's fairly structured. You do reading to write in term 1. You would do module A in term 2, and module B in term 3. Now, schools have flexibility in how they choose to do it. So some schools, they have to do reading to write first, but after that, some schools mix up mod A and B. But most just do it in a linear fashion. In year 12, it's a little different. In year 12, schools must do the common module first in term 4, but they can do module C integrated throughout the entire year. So you'll often not do an entire term on module C. You'll often do like one lesson a week out of the 3 or 4 lessons you might have for English in a given week. So mod C is integrated throughout year 12, and then schools have a very varied approach in terms of taking mod B or mod A first. Some schools do mod B first, others do mod A. And roughly speaking, what it then looks like is if you're thinking about year 12, right, we're thinking about term 4 is, of year 12 is, common module with a bit of mod C sprinkled in. Term 1 of the next year is usually a mod A or mod B. Term 2 is a mod A or B with a little bit more mod C starting to happen. And then term 3, you're at trials, right? So you don't really have time to do a new module then. And so it's just trial prep, get your trials done, and then post-trials, whatever preparation, whatever sort of fixing needs to happen then occurs between, you've only often got like a 5-week period post-trials anyway, because most of that third term in that year is taken up by trials. So that's the way it sort of ends up playing out structurally. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. So, any other questions on English I can help with? Is that a question, Tarun?
Yeah, it is. My question is, like, does trials go towards your yearly grade, or is that like excluded from it?
Cool, good question. So, no, that does contribute. So, basically, what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm just going to flick over and share my iPad so I can just write a couple of things that might.
Nice.
And I'm just going to get open into my iPad and then I will share. Great. Can you see my iPad screen at all yet or not? No. I've got that. Unprompted. Sorry guys, let me just see if I can do this. I want to see if I can.
Started screen sharing.
It just said that I just started screen sharing. Is that what it came up with?
Yeah, but no images loaded yet for me.
Yeah, okay. It's just.
Same on this end.
I've definitely connected my iPad to here. What is connect when prompted on your iPhone or iPad? Select trust. Oh, I did that, and I wasn't prompted. I may not be able to write today. I've just got a new laptop, guys, and so usually I like writing on my iPad to explain stuff, but my laptop might not be playing as nicely as I would like. Which is a real shame. That's okay. I have another way to do it. Let me just stop for a moment, guys. Let me do this. Fortunately, there's a couple of different ways we can do this. What's that? Just give me a tick. Sorry, guys. I'm just going to open up another app that'll enable me to share my screen still with you, but it'll bring my iPad up on my book, on my MacBook for you as well. Okay, great.
In the meantime, one useful thing might be if everyone could share in the group chat a list of the subjects that you are currently considering doing next year. Even if there's a bit more than the total number you'll be allowed, if you can share with the group the ones that you are currently putting on your shortlist, and that might help us later on know where to focus.
For that, Daniel, do you want like a really specific list if we've thought it out, or just a couple of subjects that we're thinking of doing?
Look, if it's going to be like you're still tossing up between like 20 different subjects, then don't list all 20. But if you have a short list of, you know, the 8 or 9 that are in the running, yeah, name the specific one as well. So like maths extension 1 or engineering studies or whatever it might be.
All right, guys, while you're doing that, I have managed to get, just with another system that I have here, I've been able to sort this out a little bit. So I can now share my screen and you can see my, you'll be able to see my iPad, which is great. Cool. Can you guys see this now?
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay, cool. So we can see. So now this will make it a little easier, and I'll have to sort out for next time what my thing looks like. So great. So your question, Tron, was what does it sort of look like mark-wise almost across the year, right? And so if we just change this for a tick and we say year 11 here, okay. What we want to have for year 11 is we'll have T1, T2, T3, and then we've got year 12. And we'll have it's a little different here, right? But we'll have T4, T1, T2, T3. Now, in year 11, you'll have an assessment here. You'll have an assessment here. And if I could spell assessment, that would be helpful, wouldn't it? And then you'll have your end of year 11 exams here. So you get 2 assessment blocks and then you get your exams. Where year 12, what will happen is that this is trials. Okay, and then you'll have usually, because you've got 4 assessments across it, right? You'll have assessment number 1 here, assessment number 2, and then assessment number 3. And the way this works is that all of this here will total 100% in terms of mark weighting. So your trials are usually worth about 30%. And these trials are essentially like an end of year exam, right? But they're internally on everything that you've learned. So usually the first assessment's worth about 20, right? Then, 25. And then I think that gives us another 25% in here. Okay, and then that's what creates your internal. But your internal, remember, is only actually worth 50% because your external, you then got over here, you've got ultimately in term 4, you've actually got here, you've got your external HSC exam. Okay, and that's worth 50% of your overall marks. So we take the internal over the 4 terms and we halve the mark weighting. Does that make sense? So, yeah, cool. It means that ultimately, and this is actually a good thing for you guys to be aware of now anyway, as you go into years 11 and 12. One, what you do in year 11 doesn't count for year 12, right? So you get a reset button when you start here. So when you get here, you get to hit the reset button, okay, which is great. So you get to go, oh, I screwed up year 11, great, I get to start fresh. Now that doesn't mean that you should just bludgeon throughout year 11. You go home and you're like, yep, awesome, Ron said I can do nothing. The reason that's the case is because the new syllabus is actually a lot more interconnected now across years 11 and 12. So what you're learning in year 11 is much more foundational for what you do in year 12 in terms of assumed knowledge. So it means that if you don't do as well in year 11, right, and you drop the ball in year 11, while you do get the reset button here, you've got a lot more work to do. You've got like a lot of catch up that needs to actually happen if you really want to turn things around. Where old syllabus, they were a lot more distinct in terms of the two, and you could more easily just not do a whole lot in year 11, press reset, start fresh, right? Now you do start fresh in terms of marks, but I just want you to be aware that what you do in year 11 will set you up for year 12. Year 11 is also relevant because it'll be used for scholarship applications, and some of the early entry applications that you might do in year 12 will ask you to include your year 11 marks. Okay, so it's why you don't want to completely just write off year 11, and I don't think any of you guys will. You're all pretty switched on and motivated, but I think it's just important to highlight, like, that's what the sort of big picture looks like, right, in terms of what you would have sort of coming. Does anyone have any other questions about this before we keep on moving? Cool.
Trial exams in year 12, they based on your current, like they're held by your school, right? Like
they're done internally. That's right. Yes. Right. So everything here, that I'll just use another color. Everything in this here is all done internally at school. Right, so 50% of what you do will be internal, 50% in the end will be external on the HSC exam. So the ultimate news here is, even if you screw up year 12, you shouldn't quit until the very last moment, because you've still got, you've still got 50% over here, right, sitting in these final set of exams. So, okay, if you screw up all your internals, well, 50% is not great, right? But the point is that even if you haven't done as well, you've still got this like last opportunity to really make a significant difference. And we see a lot of students do that. They maybe don't do quite as well as they would like, and then they really put it together and do quite well externally, and then it lifts their ATAR and it creates more options for them in terms of university. So key, don't quit until really the final HSC exam, because you've still got 50% writing on it. Brilliant. Let's keep on moving, because this is English and we've gone into some other questions right now, but that's perfectly fine. I'm just going to jump across and share my screen again, but I'm going to share my slides again, if I can, with you all, just so that we can jump in. Great. So where I want to sort of jump onto now, guys, with our slides is I want to talk briefly about maths. Okay. Now, maths has got a bit of a staggered implementation. I want to find out again from the chat, and actually I should probably just go and look at the chat right now just to see what is going on. Let me find, where is our chat? I want to just get a sense of what level of maths are you guys thinking about taking?
Extension 1.
Extension 1.
Extension 1 and 2.
Cool.
Me too.
Advanced.
Great.
Advanced.
Yeah,
Cool.
extension.
Amazing. So we've got a whole lot of maths geeks or maths lovers here, which is amazing, right? In terms of taking some solid levels. So for that, what that means is, oh, there we go. I can see your chat here. Brilliant. Okay, I can see all of it. Fantastic. So let's jump in. And what I'm going to just talk about here, I think, guys, is I want to talk about, I'm not going to talk about standard maths because I don't think is anyone here thinking about standard maths? Oh, we do.
Mia, yep.
Oh, awesome, Mia. Okay, so one of the things, Mia, just to be mindful of with standard maths is that, it will have some scaling implications, but if maths isn't your thing, it's a relevant consideration, which we're going to talk about as we progress. What they have done is they have implemented particularly a couple of new areas, networks being the big one, which is generally considered to be the most challenging area because it's new. There's not a lot of resources available. A lot of people don't necessarily get their head around it. Okay, so just want to flag for maths, for standard, networks is probably the area to be aware of as you go into the course. And you can see that you've got there both some networks that you do in year 11 and some networks that you do in year 12. So, guys, this is just a breakdown. I've got it in the workbook for you as well so that you can see. This is what the new, and I've said 2019 because it's from 2019, this curriculum. This is what the new topics look like, okay, in terms of what we can see for the course itself. And so, guys, I just want to quickly move this so I can actually see what I'm talking about here. So we can see, guys, overall that, actually, I want to do something else. Let me just, oh, sorry, guys. I'm just trying to get rid of the chat for a moment so that I can actually see. And let's do this. Actually, let's do this here. Brilliant. So we can see that what's happening is the advanced course is actually has got harder. So we've got a bunch of new stuff. Descriptive stats is new. We've had some stuff that's been moved down from 3 unit. We've seen matrix operations move into the course, which is actually a topic from first year of university. And then we've seen a bunch of topics move. Some of the topics have been moved up to 3 unit, which is good. And some have been moved up to 4 unit. But overall, the sense has been that the advanced course has become more difficult. Now, I don't share that to persuade you not to do it. It's just a reality. Okay, and it's actually a reality because as a result, advanced maths has become a very good pairing with the chemistry course. So if you're thinking about like advanced maths and you're thinking about a science, there's a fair bit more calculation in the new science chemistry course. And what we've seen is that there's actually a really good overlap and it just builds your calculation foundations a lot more strongly if you're taking advanced maths and chem as a paired subject. Right, as in if you're doing advanced and you're thinking about a science, you take chem, right? So that's advanced maths. Before I keep on moving, does anyone have any questions about advanced maths? If you're thinking about doing it.
Advanced maths, but it's about extension 1.
Yep.
So is extension 3 units, or is it like 1 unit on top of advanced maths?
Cool. Yeah, it's 1 unit. Yeah, good question. It's called 3 unit maths, but it's actually just 1 unit that's added on top of it, right? Now, if you do 3 unit maths, it means all of your classes, it's not like English. In English, right, with English, you'll do advanced English, and if you then do an extension, it's a separate class, and it's got like a very disparate set of content that's very disconnected, right? As in you're doing entirely different texts, different modules, etc. So in English, the differences between advanced and extension are more stark and they sit more as separate. In maths, particularly between advanced and extension 1, if you take extension 1, your classes will be an extension 1 stream and they will teach you 2 unit and 3 unit integrated, right? Because maths is a lot more, it builds upon each other a lot more. So you would be in classes that are 3U classes and you would be doing 2 unit content for maybe a couple of lessons in that week. And then when you hit like the edge of that and then you're going into the 3 unit, which is topped up, you'll then jump into the 3 unit material. And often you won't even necessarily always be aware as you go through the year then on what's always 2U and 3U content. Now you can always work it out because there are clear syllabus that shows you those topics. Particularly when you come in to do your prep for your 2U and your 3U assessments, because you will get separate assessments for them. It's just that they're taught a lot more integrated. So I've seen, I think, maybe some questions come through. I can't see them all that easily on the chat. Daniel, could you let me know what were the questions that have come through there?
No, they're fine. We're all good.
Oh, they're just comments?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Great. So then here's the 3U course, guys. So you can see that they've bumped functions up from 2 unit. They've moved parametric functions down from 4 unit. They've added polynomials from 4 unit. They've included vectors, which is first year uni physics and algebra. They've included binomial distribution, which is first year, second semester university. So 3U's got, if advanced got a little harder, 3U's got a lot harder, okay? And a lot of this has come from the perspective that the universities were getting frustrated that they didn't feel like students were entering into first year university with strong enough fundamentals, particularly for, you know, your sort of science and engineering courses. And so that's why they're bringing some of this stuff in. Now, the result is 3-unit maths is a really good pairing with physics. So, you know, there's an increased overlap between the two. And also if you're then looking at particularly, you know, doing physics and engineering, right, at university, then 3-unit maths should be your absolute like minimum level of mathematics you're aspiring to take, right? So we see 2U and Chem being a really good pairing, and we've found with this new syllabus that 3U and physics has proven to be a successful pairing as well, just because of some of the overlap in some of the work that you'll do in the physics and the 3-unit maths course. So, any questions about the 3-unit course at this point?
Is it all added on the old topics?
Sorry, say that again, Tron. Your mic's moving in and out of mute.
Is it all on top of the old unit, or is it like they're taking like stuff out and then replacing it?
Yeah, so the old topics there are the ongoing topics, right? So the old topics are they're continuing to be part of the course. It's then the column here with the changes is where they have added or removed things.
Yeah.
Yeah, good question. Cool. Any other questions about 3-unit right now? Awesome. So now I'm not going to jump into 4U specifically for now, just because I know there's maybe 2 of you guys that are thinking about 4U. We'll want to come back to 4U when we talk about workload and you know, like how you might think of the number of units you take in year 12 versus you know, year 11. Sorry, because if you're thinking about 4-unit, you need to design the units you do in year 11 quite carefully, because you might need to drop a unit to pick up the fourth unit of maths or English for that matter. So for those of you thinking about 4-unit, hold that in your mind when we get to a workload. Let's have a conversation about it. So really quick, guys, here's your sort of difficulty. As you can see, it's just a quick table, right? We've got, you know, standard maths has a similar workload, but we've just got networks, critical networks and stats. As we talked about, 2-unit has definitely got a little more complex, okay? And 3-unit certainly really upped the game. Now, the big thing here is that is anyone thinking about going to Sydney Uni possibly, or wanting to keep that open as an option?
I am.
Cool. All right. So the reason I ask that is that if you're thinking about it, Sydney University have a requirement where unless you're doing an entirely like non-mathematics related course, so you're doing like an arts degree, they have a requirement that everyone must do advanced mathematics, 2U mathematics, and they must get a Band 4 in it to actually study at the university. Now, if you don't do that, the implication is that you can't do a bridging course, which is what was offered in the past. You would have to do an arts degree for a year and then do Maths 101, Maths 102 as part of university for that first year. Show that you can meet the minimum standards for mathematics and then transfer the next year into your degree. So you're basically like, you'd be a year behind if you really wanted to go to Sydney. Now, increasingly, a lot of degrees are starting to add advanced maths at some of the other unis as well as like a minimum requirement. So it's just one, if you're doing advanced maths and it gets hard in years 11 and 12, you want to think long and hard about dropping it, because it can shut down a fair few university options for you in terms of courses. You know, if you know, you're thinking about standard maths now, you just want to be mindful, and we're going to look at a bunch of courses. Are there any courses I want to do that actually may have advanced maths as a prereq that I might need to just bite the bullet and do now, even if I'm not super excited about the prospect of it, okay? So it's one of the important things.
I might just add there as well that by non-humanities courses, that includes a lot of popular courses that might not sound especially mathematical on their face. So it includes something like psychology, for example, any human sciences, all of those would be subject to the new mathematics prerequisite.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, even commerce, right? You might think, oh, there's not that much maths. I love economics. I like business. I'm doing commerce right now. There's a big, and the big factor for this is a lot of the courses have some integrated statistics parts of it, which require you to have, at least advanced maths. Although, in spaces it's even beyond that, right? And so we're going to look at them, but 3U, there are a bunch of engineering degrees that have 3-unit maths as a prereq, and there's a lot of commerce degrees that have it as what's called assumed knowledge. So I want to ask you guys, what do you think is the difference between when a university course says like recommended or assumed and a prerequisite?
Well, I think assumed is knowledge you should know, but they don't require you to know that. It's not compulsory to know that knowledge. While prerequisite means you have to have done that course. Otherwise, they won't let you study.
Yeah, good. So prereq, exactly. When you see prereq, you've got no wriggle room. When you see assumed or recommended, assumed is probably a little bit more so than recommended, in that assumed is, well, you're going to be doing material that basically builds on what you would have done in that course, right? So you could do it, but you'd have like a lot of catch up that you'd have to do very quickly. Where recommended is not necessarily that it's going to build on it, but it's just, look, it'd be helpful. So we've sort of got those three flavors, right? We've got assumed, recommended, and in order of like the intensity, it's like recommended, assumed, prerequisite. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. So the big thing in all of this is that, 3-unit, you can always drop down and drop it, right? Advanced, you can always drop down to standard. Standard, you can never level up. You're always in standard. And so one of the things we encourage a lot of students to do is to always go for the higher level. You can always drop. You try it for a term, you try it for 2 terms. If it's too hard, you then can evaluate what you want to do. As opposed to if you do it the other way, you might get in and go, oh, actually, this is pretty easy, and I'm actually shooting myself in the foot with, minimizing options. So any questions here before we move on to the sciences?
Can you drop down from 3-unit to standard, or can you only drop down 1 step?
You could, but you'd have to do it in 2 steps, right? So you would drop 3-unit first, and then you'd be in advanced, and then you would drop from advanced into standard. In saying that, it'd probably be pretty unusual for that to happen. Just, not to say it hasn't happened before, but it would be unusual to happen. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And the reason it would be unusual, Sumit, is just that, if you were taking 3-unit, the expectation would be that if you dropped it, you would still be more than comfortable to do fairly well in advanced.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions here before we keep on moving?
Yeah, I had a question.
Cool. Go for it, Drew.
If I was doing 2-unit maths or advanced maths and I dropped to standard, could I work my way back up to advanced?
Yeah, so no, you can never. That's the sort of painful part about this, right? So you can never work your way back up. As soon as you drop down, it's like you're locked in. So one of the things that we recommend for students, therefore, to do is to actually hold on to their higher level units for as long as possible. So as an example, a lot of students start at the end of year 11, they pick their subjects, they might take some advanced, some extension units, and then they get their end of year 11 results back and they look at them and go, these are crap, I'm going to drop this, right? And that can actually be sometimes quite dangerous, just because subjects can change. They do change. The area of the content changes from years 11 to 12. You might get a different teacher. That makes a huge difference. And because you can't go back up, if you drop it, then you're stuck. And so our recommendation is ideally you hold them almost until the end of term 4, which is term 1 of year 12, where you've got like one data point right then from your assessment there on how you're tracking. And then at that point, you make a decision, right, on whether to drop or not, because it still gives you 3 terms to like catch up a term and to really build your knowledge on the level down. And by then, you're less likely to make a bad decision about dropping preemptively just because you weren't liking something or you had a single, a single bad result that came through. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Cool. So hold on if you can, right? So I'd take, in your case where you can, take the more advanced level and then hold on for as long as it seems appropriate. Yeah. Any other questions before we keep on moving?
Yeah, just one more.
Yeah, go for it.
Subjects in year 11 and year 12, or
So I missed the start of that, Sumit.
can you drop subjects
Cool.
and year 12?
Yeah, look, some schools have policies about it. In most cases, you need to take a minimum of 12 units throughout year 11. And so you can only really start the drop conversation really in the final term of year 11. And then you put in your subjects to drop as part of, the transition from year 11, term 3 into term 4. Unless, I think some schools, if you've taken 13 or 14 units in year 11, you may have more wiggle room to drop down to 12. But I think it's mandated you must take 12. So your ability to drop in year 11 depends on how many you start with, right? In year 12, you can really drop units anytime, although, the later on, in some respects, the more difficult it can become. One, because if you're dropping down from 2 unit to standard, you then need to go and catch up all of the standard course that you've lost, that you didn't get taught, right? So the longer you leave it, then the more catch up you have to do. Now, it's possible. I know students that dropped from advanced into standard a month before their trials, right? So they had a month to do a catch up. Now that was a lot of work. It's not ideal though, right? So you can see how that can play a bit of an impact. Additionally, the other factor to be aware of here is that, you could also drop an entire subject. If you had 12 units, you could drop your subject, right before trials. Now you need to drop it ultimately before the marks from school get submitted externally to NESA, right? So there is again like a natural sort of endpoint where you would probably be dropping it just before your trials as a worst case, at the very last, the very last case.
Okay. So basically, you can drop subjects midterm or like during.
Yeah, you can.
But it's not ideal.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yes, you can. It depends a lot then on the subject and what's going on. Yes. Sometimes it can be ideal. Probably not. Yes, in short.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Cool. Let's. I know we'll have more questions, guys. I do want to keep things ticking along a little as well, because there's still a bucket load I'd love to cover with you in the next sort of hour and 50 or so minutes. Now, I want to jump in and talk a little bit about sciences. Now, I want to get a sense who here's, and again, I haven't been able to see all the comments, who here's thinking about taking a science. So chem, phys, bio, earth and environmental.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. So what are some of those, maybe super quickly, just let me know.
Yeah, chemistry and physics with the
Cool.
3 unit and 2 unit maths.
Yeah, awesome. So you got the good pairing there, Tarun. Awesome. Who else?
I'm thinking of doing physics, though the genetic part of bio I seem to do well in.
Okay, cool. So we need to unpack how that plays out. Cool, Drew. Okay, good insight around what you do well at. Great. I think, Sumed, were you looking at the science as well?
Yeah, physics and
Cool.
the maths course to pair with it.
Okay, awesome. And then,
I'm thinking physics.
yeah, Aaron, okay, physics, awesome. And then we've got Mia, Olivia, Chloe. Am I getting those names right? I can't see people's names. I'm just trying to go through them. Bio, okay, awesome.
I might do physics, but I wasn't really sure
Weren't sure
about it.
Okay, cool. Okay, great. Well, hopefully I can give you some info for the guys sitting on the fence that might help make a decision either way. So just to flag, and Chloe, did you share what you were thinking about? Were you thinking of a science?
I'm not sure that I'm going to pick a science.
Okay, cool. Okay. So guys, science has had the biggest overhaul, some big changes. They launched a new extension subject. There's new content. They got rid of options. So the courses used to have like 3 common modules and then schools would pick an option. They've cut that. that makes life easier for everyone, for you to prepare for them as well, because it means there's 8 common modules across the entire state. You know how you're progressing through them, which is great. Okay. Now, couple of things. Chemistry, as we said, has more maths included, so it's got a good pairing with 2U. Biology has a lot more sort of 3U overlap. Physics. Bio, ultimately, guys, is one of these interesting subjects, and same with Earth and Environmental, but bio particularly because it's a very common one, right? That actually, while it's really interesting, is almost got zero like university value. And so what I mean by that is that there's absolutely like no courses where biology is a prereq, and there's almost no courses where it's even like recommended or assumed knowledge. So it's an interesting course to do, but just be mindful if you're trying to decide between 2 sciences and you're thinking about opening options up for university, and that's a priority over maybe just preference and enjoyment. Bio doesn't necessarily open a lot of doors. It's a cool subject. You learn a lot about, obviously, in biology and beyond, right? But it doesn't actually lead to a whole lot of external university options. Now, it's also very content focused. So if we look at the 3 courses here, you know, biology is a lot of content and memorization, right? It's a lot of that. So if you feel that's an area of strength for you, right, where you're quite confident in terms of if you're thinking about a science and that's an area where you're like, yep, I'm really good at, you know, like I can learn lots of content, particularly, you know, when, you know, it's maybe not as conceptual and it's a little bit more concrete and less abstract, then bio is a great fit, right? Where phys and chemistry has a lot more calculations. And so definitely to take chem, you want to make sure that you're feeling confident in mathematics. Equally, chem is almost going to be a prereq if you're thinking about any health sciences. So, you know, pharmacy, medicine, physio, particularly, right? I mean, they're just a couple of the sort of more popular, med science certainly as well, more popular sort of health science degrees. Chem is considered in most cases a prerequisite, right? So we really want to make sure that you have that as one of your cores. Now, physics is generally, it's considered assumed knowledge in engineering. It's nice to have. You can get away without doing it, but it does make first year engineering a little more challenging. So, you know, for those of you, if you really wanted to open up and you're thinking health sciences and engineering, I don't know which way I want to go, you know, you sort of end up having your subjects as 3-unit maths, phys, chem, right? It's very math science heavy. And then you have your 2 units of English that you make up as part of the sort of compulsory, you know, given that they're compulsory. So that's sort of overview. Any questions about this before I just do a quick deep dive into a couple of the subjects specifically and particularly then look at the extension science unit?
Yeah. With the Earth and Environmental, is that considered like one of the easiest sciences, and could you get like easy marks in that subject, or is it just as hard as chemistry and physics?
So it's a lot easier, honestly. Like chemistry and physics out of the 2 will be the most difficult, and actually most people say chemistry is the most difficult. So physics has a bit of a reputation of being really challenging, but with the new syllabus, we see that most students really have struggled with chemistry. As opposed to physics. Physics is still hard, but it's more conceptually hard. And once you push through that, it makes sense, right? And what you need to do is not so difficult. Chem's difficult. Now, Earth and Environmental is, yes, out of the 4 here, out of the sort of, you know, big 4 sciences more common, it is, yeah, definitely by far the conceptually the most easiest because 1, the ideas are not as complex that you need to learn, and 2, the levels of calculation that you need to do are also a lot less, right? Now, does that mean that you can just do really well and get better? Well, that comes to a scaling question, Tarun. And the answer is a little bit of yes and no. If you do very, 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 very well, you're going to do well from a scaling implication. And maybe you look at it and go, yes, I think I can, you know, get a state rank, or I can, you know, I can get a 97% plus mark in this. Beyond that though, right, it doesn't scale anywhere near as well as physics or chemistry. And so therefore, it's sort of this weird thing where you either take it because you know that you're going to knock it out of the park and be like really like at the top end of the entire state. If you're not in that category, right, well, then all of a sudden it actually is quite hard for you to necessarily get it to a point that will be comparable potentially in terms of scaling compared to physics and chemistry.
Yeah.
Now, no, we haven't got there yet, but yes, chem and phys do scale better than biology. And that's again, just because they are more challenging. That's not necessarily how scaling works, but for now, until I explain more, that's a good rule of thumb in terms of difficulty has some correlation with scaling. It's actually, yeah, not the way it works, but let's use it for the moment because it's roughly useful and accurate for now. So any other questions about these before we keep on just diving a little deeper?
Yeah, I had a question regarding physics and chemistry, sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
I know there'll be overlap in the answer to my question, I guess, but what are the, how do I word this? What are the different career paths that chemistry can get me versus what physics can get me? Like the most different career paths.
Cool. Daniel, do you want to start the answer to this and then I can dive in and add a little more as well?
I guess the probably point I'd start with is that they're not quite linear in that way. So there's not quite a set of, there's not a large number of careers on either side where there wouldn't be much crossover, and there'd be ample opportunity in university for you to keep borrowing from either one. Obviously, there are some specializations later. There are such things as physicists and chemists, but you're not totally closing off an option if you're more drawn to one at the other at the moment.
What I will add is that there are, though, at the same time, so Daniel's right, there's a lot more flexibility when you get into university, right, in how you handle it. There are, though, broadly two sort of general pathways that start to emerge with phys and chem, right, from a career perspective. If you're looking at chem, it does generally lead you in a foundation to do with more to do with health sciences. So you would be careers that typically come off the back of chem might be pharmaceuticals, pharmacy, that could be in research, or it could be as a pharmacist, right? You could be, doing sort of more, biochemistry as well. So you start going down a research by looking at just, drugs, essentially, how we can, vaccines, pretty relevant for right now, actually. So you've got like a research pathway that really opens up, and it's particularly more to do with, health, human sciences, biology, drug development, right? And you've then got connected to that chemistry that also then just opens up, your sort of more typical, medicine and medicine related pathways, right? In terms of whether or not that's, GP, surgeon, anaesthetist, etc. Right? And certainly, the anaesthetist pathway, for example, does draw quite strongly on chemistry. So that's like the broad arc there. Okay, if that makes sense. Physics does start pushing you down a slightly different pathway. Okay, so for physics, it starts opening up, and not just physics alone, but it would be physics and maths. But physics and maths starts opening up because they're probably in university, physics and maths are much more closely interconnected, I would say, than chemistry and maths. And for physics and maths, what you start looking at is you start looking at the engineering sort of domain, but you've got a whole range right within there. But particularly, you've got electrical engineering, you've got aeronautical engineering. So you're starting to look at space as well. You have robotics as part of it. You've got, and that's mechatronic engineering. You have civil, less so, but still very important. Civil engineering as well in terms of just building. You've got like architecture to some extent. You use less physics because you're less involved in the build side of things. But depending on where you go, in terms of civil engineering, it does start touching upon that. And then you've also got a pathway, particularly into like astronomy. And sort of thinking space, right? And space exploration, which is why there starts to be that sort of connection with, aeronautical and space. And then on top of that, with phys, there's another area that's just, I had it and it's escaping me now. Lost it. Well, there is a whole lot of AI, sorry. That's a little bit more of programming, but it does often have a very strong physics underpinning. And so that can also sort of support. And then you've got research as a physicist as well, as Daniel was highlighting, and you can go more deeply into that area. So does that help, Drew, give you sort of like a little bit of like the pathways that it can take you down?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. Anyone else have any questions about that? Or about the sciences right now?
Yeah, so what's the overlap with 3-year maths and physics?
Cool. I just heard that question. Was that you, Sumit?
Oh, that was me, Aryan.
Oh, sorry, Aryan. I couldn't quite. Let me just double check if I have that here. I know I had, maybe I don't have it in this slide deck. I do have a slide that actually sort of maps them a little more clearly. Let me see. Let me just see if I can really quickly find that for you, because we did put together like a whole thing on it. Let me just close that for a moment. That's my reflector. Just give me a tick, guys. I just want to see, the obvious part is there's a whole bunch of stuff relating to projectile motion that you do in both 3U and in physics. So that's the obvious answer, that there is just, some specific topics that have direct overlap. But I do want to try to find if I can't find it quickly now, I'll find it afterwards and I'll share it with you guys via email or on the Facebook group, just so that you can see that interconnection. Just let me have a look.
There's a Facebook group?
Looks like someone needs to get invited to that.
Whose question was that?
That was me.
Oh, it was you. Let me put the link into the group chat.
Cool. There is indeed a Facebook group, guys. So guys, I'm just trying to see if I can
invitation only group, or is it like an open group?
Invitation only, yeah.
Okay.
The link should, if you ever lose it again, the link is in the email which introduced you to your mentor.
Okay, cool.
Guys, I'm going to need to come back to that. I just want to keep them. I know I have it here, but I've just got a lot of slides and I'm trying to do a quick scan through to find the one that it's in where it has a connection, and I can't find it right now. So what I will say is I'll come back to you guys after today with it. Let me just see if I found it actually. Have I? No. So yeah, I'll need to come back to you guys on it. But projectile motion is an example of it. There are other topics like it that have a little bit of overlap as well. Cool. So, great. So jumping back, I'm just going to now keep on moving for a little bit, guys, but just keep on asking questions. Now, I've included, I'm not going to cover these now because I've included.
You've knocked your thing out again. We can't hear you again.
Oh, cool. What about now?
Yeah, we can hear you this time.
Okay, cool. I'm back. Thanks, guys. Yeah, I got a little enthusiastic again, clearly. I'm not going to go through the specific changes unless you have questions, but in essence, you'll see that a lot of the course is the same. They've renamed some things, but they look pretty similar. In most cases, there's about 35% of each of the new syllabus that are different, right? As part of the transition, because part of that is the option topics. They've moved a lot of option topics and integrated it throughout the sort of core modules. And then they've added some additional stuff. So yeah, any questions about any more about the sciences here before I talk about some of the other science subjects in the extension unit, in case some of you are thinking about it?
I wrote down the new content areas for the subject. I didn't see.
So there are two others. We've got investigating science and science life skills. So now these are still not very commonly taken. Science life skills is almost like the equivalent of standard maths. Okay, if you're not a huge science person, but you want to have like a fundamental basic understanding of science, you could consider taking the science life skills course. Now, the investigating science subject, guys, is a lot more about getting you to think and problem solve scientifically. So it's about looking at, particularly if you were thinking about doing science at university and doing research, it's a good sort of primer in getting you to think about, some of the key research report writing skills that you would use and how to think about doing good research and cause and effect and, correlation versus causation and the sort of things that you would then be using as you get into university. Okay. Now, in saying that, a lot of students investigating science hasn't been a hugely popular one, not because it's not actually it's quite interesting as a course. It's just because, it's not a prereq for anything. And if you've already got to take physics or chemistry, it just means that you start getting very heavy on the sciences. Is anyone thinking about taking either of these? I think that's a no. Okay, that's okay. Now, is anyone thinking about science extension?
No, not at this moment, but I don't think I would take this.
No one?
Sorry,
Well,
I just
I'm
had
just going to share, because science extension is not a subject you need to pick just yet. It's sort of like 4-unit maths, right? Or 4-unit English. At the end of year 11, you'll need to make a decision on, do you take 4-unit maths? Do you take 4-unit English? Do you take science extension? It's an extra 1-unit subject. It's focused on a research project. It's also designed to be very much about prepping you for university, for science at university. And so it's not that dissimilar to, how the other extension units might work. You need to take at least 2 units of science in year 11 and year 12 for it. Drew, do you have a question about it?
No, I had a question about the investigating science in the last slide.
I'm not sure if you're speaking, Drew. I can't hear anything.
Hello? Can you hear me now?
Oh,
We can hear you.
I can't hear anyone.
I can hear you.
That's weird. Give me a tick, guys. Looks like it's at my end, eh?
Hello. Wait, Samed, you can hear me, right?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Okay, external.
I
Let me have a
can.
look.
Okay.
Okay, I can hear you guys now. Amazing. I don't know what happened there. Headphones. Gotta love them. Great. Drew, did you have a question?
Yes.
Yes, go for it.
I just had it was slightly less relevant to me, but just more out of curiosity. In the last slide that we were talking about, investigating sciences, I think, was one of the options.
Yep.
Does that have any tie into if somebody were to choose to do criminology?
Yeah, okay, nice. That's a good question. I like it. Look, a little more than perhaps, so actually I should have highlighted chemistry also creates a pathway into like forensic CSI. Just, when you ask that question, Drew, about career options that sort of flow off the back of each. Look, not directly. I mean, I think it's good in that it teaches a real problem solving sort of set of skills, definitely. There isn't, I would say, there's no direct connection, to sort of say, well, great, investigating science, prepares you if you're exploring criminology at university. So if you wanted to do it out of interest and you have these spare units, great. But if not, it's not going to really, be any drawbacks for you at all.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. So, who here is looking at some humanities in terms of maybe, the history, modern or ancient, some economics, some legal studies, some geography, some PHPE?
Yeah, I'm looking at economics.
I'm looking at
economics.
modern history.
Cool. Great.
Actually, I still had a question about the extension science. Sorry.
Okay, cool. All right, before we jump, I just want to hear what everyone's going to do humanities, then I'll come back and answer that question. Cool. What's the other humanities we're thinking about doing, guys?
I'm thinking business.
Cool. Business. Okay. Awesome.
Business studies, economics, and modern history.
Oh, here we go. So this is your jam, Olivia, right?
Yeah.
Excellent. It's like, no thanks, math science. Give me these guys. Okay. Awesome. So before we push on, I think it was Sumit. Did you have a question on extension science? Yep.
Yeah, so the extension science additional unit, does it fit onto either one, like any one of the
Yeah.
previous science
Any
courses?
any of the other sciences, as long as you take 2 units, you can do this on top of, right? So if chem, phys,
Okay.
bio, earth and environmental, doesn't matter.
It's just like an add-on.
Yeah, it's an add-on. Exactly
Thank
right.
you.
Cool. Now, the thing I should note, guys, with science extension, for those of you that may think about taking it, is not many schools. It's a entirely new subject, and they've only had 2 years to sort of run it. So the thing I have heard is that it has been quite hit and miss for students at different schools. Some, it's been an awesome subject that they've taken as an additional unit. They've really loved it. Others, man, not so great because the school has not really known how to handle it, and it's been a bit of a mess. Okay. So if you are thinking about doing it over year 11, I would try to chat to some of the year 12s that take it at your school to find out, is it any good at your school? Because the variance right now, school to school, is quite significant in terms of just the quality of the science extension course, just because it is entirely new and schools are still getting their head around it.
Okay.
Cool. So we've got humanities. Now, I want to just highlight for those of you that are thinking about ancient and modern or extension, because this is where the syllabus has changed. Business studies, syllabus is the same. Economics, syllabus is the same. Legal studies, syllabus is the same. PDHPE, syllabus is the same. Community and family studies, society and culture, geography, all of those syllabus is the same, right? So great thing, you got loads of practice papers and resources and all sorts of things that are available. Where the syllabus has changed is ancient and modern. Is anyone trying to work out whether or not you should take ancient or modern?
I think I know I'm going to take modern.
Cool. Like, I'm sold. Modern. Anyone else struggling with the tension between the two?
I don't know if I should take any history subjects at all.
Okay. So what I'll quickly highlight, and maybe this will help you, Olivia, and maybe Drew, it might also just validate the decision that you've made or confirm it. The new modern course is quite political. So if you like politics, right, and you're interested in, like left and right and those ideas of and exploring, politics from a perspective of, a sort of Marxism, communism, libertarianism, you're going to really like the modern course, right? The changes to it have really made it a bigger consideration and a bigger focus on like political history as opposed to just history itself. So if you like politics, like Olivia, do you like politics at all?
I'm not really sure, but it sounds interesting.
Okay, cool. So if you've got an interest in politics, then modern's pretty interesting, right? Because it is really, they also move the time period forward with the syllabus. So you actually do a lot more recent stuff. The old syllabus sort of ended in 1989 with the fall of, the sort of USSR and the Iron Curtain. And there wasn't anything after that, but so much has happened over the last, 20 years from, Afghanistan to Iraq to, the Arab Spring. There's been all these other things that have happened, right? So they have updated the course quite a lot. There's a lot more modern stuff and there's much more of a political flavor to it. So a way to work out if you're not sure about it is, like, Olivia, have you looked at the syllabus for either modern or ancient and just seen some of the topics to see whether or not they would resonate with you?
No.
Cool. So for those of you that are on the fence at all about, and this is the same for, is anyone on the fence right now between business and economics? Like, you're not sure which one exactly to take?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. Right. So I find that often what happens with subject choices, you sort of get the histories, where do I land? You get the, economics and then, you might even get it for, you sometimes get it with, geography and earth and environmental can be appearing. And then you can also get, society and culture and CAFs, right? As these two ones that people tend to be like, oh, they're sort of similar. Which one do I go? My big recommendation would be you can type, do you guys know where to find the syllabuses for the year 11 and 12 subjects? Like, do you know where to find that and access them?
NASA?
Yeah, cool, right? So I'll just do a super quick, I'll I'll just stop sharing my screen here and let me just bring open. I just want to show you guys how to do this. I know this is going to be something that's going to be really important for you anyway when you get into year 11. So can you see my browser here, guys? It's empty right now, but I've just typed in Nesta syllabus. Is that coming through?
Yep.
Yep. All right, so we basically want to jump in. We want to jump into here, right? We want to go down and we want to click on, well, we want to go up. We want to click on the 11 and 12. Okay, we can just click on one of these. At the moment, we're doing HSIE, so let's just jump in here. And then what we've got, okay, is we've got all of the different courses. So one of my recommendations would be, let's just open this up. Let's open up this one. Let's open up this one as some examples, right? Is once you jump in here, we can basically go and look at the syllabus, right? So if I just close that for a tick, this will load up the syllabus. Now, this might seem a little intense, but what we want to quickly go and have a look at is we want to jump down and we want to see, okay, as we get a little bit further, we'll need to go a fair bit in, right? We'll get to see, okay, what you're going to do in the year 11 course and whether or not this looks interesting at all for, history. So you're going to have to look at a case study. You're going to have to do an investigation, but then what topics do you actually get to do, right? Well, if we like that, the year 11 course is pretty flexible. You'll see for histories. So the schools will make a fair lot of choice about what happens, but the year 12 one's a lot more defined, right? So you've got 4 key areas and then you can see all the different topics that occur in each of these. So you could look at these, right? And so, these are not all, you just have to do one of these. So it's pretty likely that, you'll end up doing, in most cases, you'll do one of these sort of types, right? So you might be like, oh, Arab Israeli, I'd love to learn what happened there, or like Tiananmen Square in China or apartheid, right, in Africa, like that sounds cool. But if you keep on scrolling, right, what you then get into is we now get into the year 11 content a little bit more, right? And they've got a whole bunch of skills, but you can see that there will be actually a little bit of, the 11 doesn't have as much, unfortunately. You do the case studies though, so you might look at your case studies because you will do 2 case studies. For year 11, you're like, okay, is that interesting to me? So rise of communism, Mabo and Wick, the Romanov dynasty in Russia. There's a lot of cool stuff, right? American Civil War. So the point is your school might not pick all of them, but you want to go and have a look to see, does this look interesting? Now, equally, you can do the same thing for economics, okay? If you're thinking about the differences between economics and business studies. Now, what I would say, guys, is that in many respects, economics scales better than business studies. It's more challenging than business studies as well. Business studies has a lot of content. Economics has a fair bit of content, but it's actually a lot of like current context. Like you've got to read the news a lot for economics. And economics tends to be perhaps a slightly more useful one if you're just wanting to understand the economy and you're not necessarily going to business per se. The business course is fairly general. It covers a good range of things. And once again, you can go and look at the topics, right? You can see what the topics are for business studies, and then you can go and do a deep dive into them. And equally for economics, you can sort of see what the topics are and the sorts of things that you might learn, right? So if we just take a super quick look at the year 11 courses here, right? Nature of economics, economic problem, opportunity cost, how an economy works, the differences in economies, and then with business studies, right? If we look at the year 11 course, you are looking at, the role of a business, types of businesses, classifications, things that influence businesses, how they grow in the stages of their life cycle. So take a look and see which stuff appeals to you more ultimately, but actually go to the syllabus. That's really important because most of the time I find when we start to make these decisions about subjects, usually we've got like a book from school and it gives you like a little page, right? Not even a page sometimes. Sometimes it's like half a page, like about the subject. And then we make a decision based on that. And that often, might not have a whole lot of detail on it, right? Which is where this can actually just help you, because this is what you're going to be doing for 2 years, right? So it's important to get your head into this. So coming back, let me just see. Does anyone have any other questions about the humanities that you want me to dive into specifically?
I have a question.
Yeah, Aaron, you're just super quiet. So you're just going to have to speak up.
Yeah, sorry, can you hear me better now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you pick like eco and business, do you have an advantage for both of those? Like, is there any overlap?
Overlap? Not really, to be honest. I mean, yeah, not really. I mean, yes, you're reading the news for economics and you need to read the news a little bit for business studies because you'll have some case studies. So there's a little bit of overlap there in terms of like one of the study tasks that you would be doing. This papers are similarly structured, multi-choice short answer essays. So the types of study that you do across them are pretty similar. So the strategies that you would use would be very similar so it can simplify your study. Content-wise, there's really not a lot of overlap, however, right? There's a little bit, but not enough to, be the key differentiator in giving you a significant advantage in either one. Does that answer your question? I can't hear you as my headphones stopped working and I can't hear anyone now.
No, he's muted.
Oh, cool. Okay, cool. Awesome. Because I could hear you, Tarun. Great. Awesome. So did you have any more that you wanted to ask on that, Aaron? Cool. Now, Olivia and the guys that are thinking about humanities, did you have any more humanities questions that you wanted to ask for yourself? Because I know we spent a bit of time on math science. I want to make sure you guys get the time to ask your questions as well.
I don't really have any questions right now.
Okay, cool. So you do know which subjects you're going to take or not?
I think so.
Okay, cool. So what I'm looking at, guys, is I think we should take a super quick break, right? Because we're basically at almost the halfway point pretty much. And now that we've covered like what some of the subjects are about, the second half of what we're about to do is going to be very much about like, cool, let's go through and start like defining that list. Let's start cutting things out. Let's start adding things. Let's start getting strategic with workload, number of units, electives, all that sort of stuff, right? So I think now's a perfect time. Let's take 5 minutes. Do you think that's a good enough time to go to the toilet, get some water, get something to eat, come back, feel a little refreshed?
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's take a 5-minute break. So let's come back at 2:45. I've got 2:40 on my phone right now. And then at 2:45, we'll come back and we'll keep on going. Fantastic, guys. So I'm assuming Tarun and Chloe will join us shortly. I do want to continue to make the most of the time. Oh, there we go. Tarun's back. And I think Chloe is as well, which is fantastic. So I just want to jump in and start like our process now. Now that we've laid out some of the sort of like dump of here are all the subjects and some things to think about and some questions, I want to come in and actually start to look at the steps we might take. Now, the first thing I really want to talk about is a key step in the process. And we've got this in the workbook as well for you guys. So I haven't been directly following it, okay? Although roughly I'm hoping you've been following along in the workbook as well and taking notes accordingly. If we go to pages, we are now on page 22, right? Where does passion fit in? Now, I just want to highlight that before we get strategic, we really do want to start with passion, okay? The thing that we've seen time and time again is that students that don't pick for passion really end up hitting a wall by the time they get to middle of year 12, right? The volume of content grows. Something that sounded good on paper just is a real struggle street. I think we've just had an extra participant possibly want to join, Daniel. Excellent. So why is passion also important? Well, I just want to flag for you guys that ultimately in 1 year alone, you will spend 120 hours in class, okay? And I've seen your question, Tron, I'll come to in a moment. In 2 years, years 11 and 12, you spend 240 hours of time, okay, in class for that subject. Now, awful lot of time, okay, 240 hours of time. That's also not including the likely study time that you would be doing, right? So if we do the maths right, 120 hours plus at least conservatively 80 hours of study, which is 2 hours per week over a 40-week period for a subject. So 200 hours total. In year 12, we're probably saying, hey, it's 3 hours a week minimum, plus the 240 hours that you're doing, 120 hours, I should say total 120 in class, 120. So you've got 200 plus 240, 440 hours for a given subject over a 2-year period. So, a lot of time, right? Really, really important. So it's why you don't want to pick stuff that really you're looking at and you're like, I think I'm going to hate that. But it scales well, so I'm going to put it in there. Okay, so just really critical sort of steps. So I want you to just do a quick and you've already shared a list of the subjects you've done, and I've now had a chance in the chat to go through and read it, which is fantastic. What I'd love you to do here is to just jot down, and it can be in the chat as well. Actually, that might be cool, so I can see some of it. I'd love to sort of see, right, and I'm just going to see if I can get the chat up. What if you had to pick your top 2 subjects by like enjoyment, right? What would those 2 subjects be? Let me know in the chat. I'd love to see. And if you had to forcibly and then at the moment, well, let's just start with that. Let me know in the chat, right? What is the top 2 that you look at that you're like, yeah, I think I would enjoy these 2. Great. I can see some stuff happening. Cool. Commerce and maths. Okay, great. Which would be, so let's see if we can get a little, so science and maths, is that a chem, a phys, or a bio, or an earth environmental? Com, is that a business or an eco? Right? Textiles and business, cool. Eco and maths, okay, awesome. IPT and maths, great. Maths and economics. I love how popular maths is here. This is fantastic. Okay, phys and maths, and then we've got PHP and science bio. That makes a lot of sense. That's a good pairing there. Okay, cool. Now what I want you to try to do, guys, is think about, out of the subject list that you have currently put down that you're thinking about taking for next year, what is the subject that you've actually got down that you're worried that you're not going to enjoy? English. Yeah, English, I get that one. Cool, awesome. So we've got some Englishes, and unfortunately English we're sort of stuck with, right, in terms of it being compulsory. So great. Now what I want to ask you is, given that there's a subject that there's a little bit of worry there about in terms of like, hey, if I pick this, am I going to enjoy it? Is it going to be the right fit for me? What is one thing that you think each of you could do that would help you get better clarity on that subject and whether or not it should be a subject that you pick? It's a bit of a harder question to think about, right? Cool. Ask your 11 friend. Awesome. The government.
Yeah, talk to seniors.
Yeah, right. Cool. So I think talking to seniors is a great, and I guess what I'm trying to encourage you guys is that I find that subject selection every year can often happen in a bit of a vacuum where we just put the things in and we're with our parents maybe and we're like, oh, I've got to put a question in there. I've got to put another subject in to sort of fill up my units. And then you get stuck, and I find every year I see students that just end up getting stuck with 1 or 2 subjects that they just really shouldn't have picked, okay? So what is such a good idea is to have that conversation now. And not always, I'd be wary sometimes about speaking to one friend in year 11 only, because that can sometimes be a really poor representation, right? Like you could speak to them and they could have just got an assessment result back and they could be hating physics as a result at this point in time, and they could just be like, don't do it, it sucks, it's horrible, it's blah, and you're like, oh, okay, cool, I'm going to hate this, right? So if you can, I would really recommend try to at least speak to 2 different people. It could be a teacher, which is great. That's a great response as well, Mia, and a friend. So guys, I want you to put down really quickly, if you can, name the teacher or the student / friend that you could speak to get further clarity on this passion subject and whether or not it stays here. And I'm asking that because it's going to make it more concrete for all of you if you actually think about the person you could speak to. Cool. Cool, awesome. So while I'm seeing these come through, guys, connected to this, if you haven't already, if you're worried about a subject, right? Something that we spoke about and we did, right? And I've got it on the next couple of slides here. You can see that I'm sharing my screen. What about actually digging into the syllabus itself and also taking a look at the syllabus for that subject? All right, like we've talked about it. What a great way to actually take a look and see, hey, is this something that I would find interesting? Could you even go and see if you could borrow a textbook from one of the subjects, if it's phys, chem, or bio, or if it's business or eco, or if it's, PDHP or CAFs, and just take a look at the content and see if it's interesting? Would that also be a pretty easy way to just like get some more clarity on it? I'm hoping that's a yes. Yeah, thanks, Tarun. Throw me a thumbs up. Much appreciated. Cool. Right. Again, like speaking to people, fantastic, but there is stuff that you can do. And I'd really recommend that because you're going to have to live with this subject. And I'm not saying that to freak you out like, oh, there's pressure, but I just want you guys to make good choices ultimately. So that's step number one, right? You go through, make sure that you've got your subjects in order of priority in terms of passion as a starting point. And then you'll have ones that are maybe you're less passionate about. And then those are particularly the ones that you might need to spend some more time doing the extra level research, right? In terms of what the courses look like, what friends and teachers have to say about it so that you can get that clarity. Now, step number two that we need to do, and this is a really important part, this is where we need to look at what the university requirements might be. Okay, so we need to think about, hey, for some of the courses you might be wanting to do at university, what would be good prereqs, assumed, recommended stuff that we could do. So for this, I want you to go to page 24. And you can also put this down in the chat for me as well. What are some of the career pathways you're thinking you might like to pursue when you finish school? And I say might because I get that this might change, right? Like we're not going to hold you to it now, but we need to sort of reverse engineer and work backwards to have some of these in mind when we sort of go through and try to work this out. So what are some of the things you're thinking about in terms of possible degree areas you might pursue at university? If you can write them down and then let me know in the chat, that would be fantastic. And then we're going to use some of these and I'm going to share screen and we're going to dive in. I'm going to show you just the detail that you might need to actually get in and find out what's really going to be important for you.
Is this for the second point, managing university requirements?
Yeah, that's right. So this is step 2. We're on page 24 in the workbook as well.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, Bachelor of Med or a Bachelor plus a Bachelor of Science. Tarun, is that right? And then we've got double degree in Arts Law. Cool. For Dhruv. We've got Eco Law for Ariane, Com Law for Ariane, Allied Health for Mia. Cool. Business Finance for Olivia. Okay. Awesome. I feel like we've got to try to persuade some people not to study law here, Daniel. It's coming from, in my case, someone that did a combined law degree.
So surely we have some good law students who will help with that job.
Yeah, but yeah, that's true. I'm sure we will. Psych. Cool. Chloe, nice. Okay. Excellent. So, who here already uses and has used the UAC website in terms of the University Admissions Center website?
Yeah, I have.
Not me. I haven't heard that one.
Yeah, we had to use it for a careers class at school.
Yeah.
Cool. Amazing, right? So some of you guys are on top of it, which is fantastic. I'm just going to jump over. Where was my screen? Yep. Let me just stop sharing and share. And I want to just go through some of these anyway to make sure, and we'll do these together, right? Just so that if there's some things I can just show you a little bit more of, if you're not aware for the future, then fantastic, okay? So we're in, I don't actually want to go to Course Compass. I want to go to there. Just give me a tick, guys. Let's jump in. So let's just do psychology to start with, because I saw that was one of the options there. And let's just hit a little search. And then I'm actually going to go through each one of the degrees that you shared, guys. And we're just going to unpack what is it so that each of you know and that you can be super clear if you're not already on what you should do what you might need to think about doing a little bit more. Now, I know some of you are pretty on top of it. Now, I'm just going to change this so that we'll put in Macquarie, and we'll put in USyd, and we'll put in UNSW Western. Okay, it just makes it a little easier. Cool. So now that we've got psych, right, we've got a couple of different ways we can get into psych. So you'll see that there's a bunch of like arts degrees here, because you can actually do psych through an arts degree and through a science degree, for those of you that are thinking about psych. Now, this search doesn't prove to be all that helpful, does it? I would have hoped it would have reduced my search criteria a little bit more, but it hasn't really done that for me, has it? So let's keep on going so that I can find the actual Bachelor of Psych itself. Well, we've got that as a combined, but I want to see if I can get a singular. Well, that's not a bad one. Let's take a look at that, because that'll help us with a couple of areas as well. Geez, exercise physiology. It's making it tough. You would have expected to see a psych degree on its own a lot earlier. Bachelor of Psych. It's Macquarie, but Macquarie doesn't have as many of. There we go. Sydney is a good one to look at. UNSW. All right, cool. So let's take a quick look at some of these guys. So let's actually start over here. UNSW. So where we particularly want to be looking here is here, right? So you can see assumed knowledge, and see how there's that difference between assumed and recommended. They're not under the same header, right? So assumed, basically maths advanced. Now the good news is it's not a prereq at UNSW, but it's basically saying, look, you would be expected to use content that was taught under the advanced maths course. So you would have to somehow learn it on your own at university. And then we've got some recommended, right? And they're recommended just saying, look, take some of these, right? Biochem, Earth, English, Advanced, Phys. So who is taking, let me look at the chat again. Just want to have a look. Was that, that was Chloe, right? So Chloe, for your subject choice, do you have Maths Advanced down?
Yes, I do.
Brilliant. And then what, do you have any of the sciences down at the moment?
No.
Okay, cool. So you can get away without doing a science, clearly. Although, you know, particularly like one of these two, you know, not required, but is often considered helpful, right? Depending on where you take psych over the long term as well, right? So just something to think about. I know you might already have your units done. If you've got your units done, that's okay. But this is the point, right? The point of this step is we just go and we write down, okay, this is required and here's a couple of others. And then we just use that to influence and think about what we want to pull in to our decision making.
Yeah.
Now, let's just compare that at Sydney really quickly. So Sydney, they're different. They've got a clear prereq, right, for advanced maths band 4. And then assumed knowledge, they're being a little vague, right? They're just saying depends on the program studied. Well, we did say psych. That would have been helpful to tell us that. So let's go take a quick look at Macquarie. For Macquarie, again, you're going to see recommended there, but that's it, right? So good news in terms of psych. You know, maths minimum, and then maybe you think about like a possibility of like a bio or a chemistry that not required. So that's an example of psych. Now, the next one I might want to look at just quickly, guys, is maybe like a commerce degree as a comparative as well. And then we'll do just medicine after that, maybe. So let's go take a quick look. You would have hoped it would have been easier to find a commerce degree straight off the bat. It's because I've got so many universities here. Well, let's take a look. Is anyone thinking about Western Sydney, or should I remove Western Sydney from here?
I'm thinking about Western Sydney.
Cool. For what? That's for medicine though?
Yeah, I'm not sure if they offer it. I don't think so.
They do offer it for medicine, but I'll take it off just for the moment for commerce. So let's just go these 3 universities for com, because I think there's a bunch of you guys like business finance, Olivia, would be a commerce degree as an example. You know, com law with finance banking for Ariane, Echo for Ariane. So I figure com's another good double to sort of another good degree to look at. And you're going to see, okay, here we've got, they don't really have a whole lot. Admission criteria. Assumed knowledge is maths advanced, okay, which is good. You can get away with maths standard at Macquarie if you're going to be doing more of like the sort of less mathematics related courses. but then they recommend, particularly Maths Extension 1 for finance, right? So I think, RN, you're already doing Extension 1, but like, it almost means that you don't want to drop it even if it gets tough, right, during the year, which is possible. Now, that's Macquarie. They've probably got the least strict requirements. Let's go take a look at Sydney. So Sydney, again, they're really making life harder for us, aren't they? Although we know that the prereq here is a band 4 in advanced maths. Most cases, they're not going to make it that easier for us. In most cases as well, their recommendation will be extension. I went to Sydney and I wanted to do economics, for example, at Sydney University. And the recommended studies was Extension 1 maths as well. So for those of you that are thinking about taking Echo, really, even if life gets tough for 3-unit during year 12, one of the strategies I used, guys, was it was like a burn unit. I kept it, but I had 12 units, knowing that it would be a unit that wouldn't count for my ATAR necessarily, but I wanted to keep it so that I would open up my university options. And so that's one of the other ways you can start to think about some of these subjects that you might want to take for uni, but you're a little worried about whether or not how well you might go in it. I knew I wasn't going to do amazing in 3-unit. It just was a subject that I was struggling with, but I kept it because I knew I needed it to create a better foundation for uni. Because the mindset I want you to think about is you can either have it harder now in high school when you take a harder subject and then get to uni and it's easier, or you can have it a little easier in high school and then you get to uni and it's a lot harder. And ultimately at uni, you've got less support. It's a lot harder to get tutoring and your parents probably aren't necessarily going to be as willing to pay for stuff anymore because they want you to be more independent. The level of complexity increases. So something to think about is often to take harder now versus harder later, but that should also be balanced a little bit by ATAR implications. Now, if we just look at UNSW super quick, I mean, there you go, Maths Advanced, English Advanced, Extension 1. So if you're thinking commerce, just make sure that you're checking those 3 off as sort of core subjects you've taken. Now, the final sort of thing looking at the subjects here is potentially really medicine and allied health. Mia, are you thinking like nursing? When you say allied health in particular, do you have an area that you're looking at?
Just somewhere in that area.
Yeah,
Maybe
okay.
like, maybe like speech therapy or something. Or like
cool,
OT.
okay. Speech therapy. Okay, well, let's take a look at that after as well. So I'll just look at a couple of med ones really quickly so we can take a look. This is med sciences at Macquarie, recommended advanced chemistry biology, right? So if you're thinking about, and remember that you might not get into undergrad med if you're thinking about med because it's so competitive. So often the alternate pathway is med sciences. And again, pathway to make it easy here, and that's at Macquarie. If we go into the double degree of med, and this is at USyd, mind you, which is super competitive to get into. But if we basically need to get a 99.95, but more so we look at prereqs. They've got the prereq there. Let's maybe not look at SYD because of that, that criteria. Let's see if we can get another med. Maybe at UNSW would be nice as a comparative. There we go. That's with a combo, but let's just have a look. Missed that one.
What's the guaranteed selection rank?
Cool, good question. So let me just quickly highlight here what we can see in terms of, so obviously essential requirements: assumed knowledge, English standard, recommended studies, chemistry, right? So that honestly, like bio is often considered for a lot of people, I should do bio if I want to do med. Actually, it doesn't really matter. Most cases, chemistry is the real key. If you're wanting to do medicine, if you're wanting to do, even nursing to an extent, and less so for speech pathology. Now, just to explain, and I'll use another course maybe as an example. I'll use this one here. We can see, guys, that we've got Bachelor of Med Sciences, and as we scroll down, we've got a guaranteed selection rank. Now, what that basically means is that, and this is maybe not the best course. Let me see if I can find a course with some data. No, it's a new course. Give me a tick. Here we go. Cool. So this one here was the Bachelor of Commerce at USyd, right? So what this tells us is guaranteed ATAR is a 96. And that's really what you want to be looking at. So that basically means that if you get a 96 ATAR and you put this course as your first preference for university, you will guaranteed get an offer to the course, right? Now, it doesn't mean that if you don't get 96 and above, you still won't get an offer. It's just not guaranteed, and it will depend on the number of other students that have applied for that course, who have got an ATAR over the cutoff, and who have accepted an offer for that course, and the number of places available for that course, right? So there's a number of factors, and we can see that, right, when we go and we look at the data here, okay? Because what we can see with the data here is we can see, therefore, what was the lowest ATAR that was actually accepted for students in this course? What was the highest cutoff, right? And then what was the actual median ATAR? And so you can see that the guaranteed cutoff, right, that we talked about was 96. We can see the median was only a little bit below. So one of the things you can read into this, guys, is that if the median is only a little bit below the guaranteed, you know that they haven't actually offered a lot of people a spot below the guaranteed ATAR because so many people applied with the ATAR above the guaranteed spot. And so you can see here, if that's the middle one, they didn't, they were offering, there was still a group of people that were offered below, but they were still pretty close to the guaranteed cutoff. Now, on the flip side, right, if this median is quite significantly different, let me see if I can find another course. Let's have a look at the Bachelor of Commerce at UNSW. So there you go. The median here is a little bit more, right? Guaranteed's 96. The median's 94.8 here. So you can see that all of a sudden they've offered people, even though the lowest cutoff was higher than Sydney, you can see that they've offered more people a little bit below than the guaranteed cutoff. So you can start to use this to get a sense of, for you, what sort of ATAR do I actually need to get into this degree? And if I miss out the guaranteed, how close do I need to maybe be? So in this case, you could probably have got in with like a 94, right? Now, that would still be pushing it. You'd be getting like a later round offer potentially, but you would have still probably been able to get in, even though the guaranteed cutoff for this was 96. I'll just see if we have, this is the Bachelor of Psych. It's a new course, so we don't have data. By the way, guys, when it says NC, it's new course, so there's no data for it. So you can't really work that out. But this was the Bachelor of Psych at Sydney as a comparative. So we know this one doesn't have a guaranteed ATAR, but the expectation is 95 plus. Okay, and you can see that that makes sense. In fact, if the median ATAR is 96, they're offering it's quite a challenging degree, and you'd probably be wanting to get, an ATAR of 96 plus here to be certain of an offer. So does that actually, that was a great question. Anyone have any other questions about that part before we just keep on finalizing some of the subject prerequisites?
Yes, I just wanted to clarify then.
Yeah.
Basically, this means that if a university has a certain number of spots for a course, and you get the required, say for what was the other one, was a Bachelor of Commerce, I believe it was 96.
Yep, that's right. So we'll go back to that. Bachelor of Com, you said 96, yep.
So say I got 96 or 96.1 or whatever, but the university has a certain number of spots and people got 97 and above. In that case, even getting a 96 wouldn't make it a guaranteed offer, or wouldn't give me a guaranteed offer, or would it?
Yeah, look, it's a little tricky. Because they are advertising it as a guarantee. There is a bit of flexibility in the spacing, right? So I think the idea, and there's some information that I can share. I'll share this link with you guys actually, which just has the info on like guaranteed. Okay, so I think. If you take a look, right, one of the things that they apply guaranteed ATARs for courses where they're pretty certain based on historical data, they know what the sort of typical amount of first preferences will be and the amount of people that will get the ATAR above a certain threshold based on capacity. So in most cases, if they're uncertain about that, they would, and generally speaking, the data doesn't shift that much year to year, okay, in terms of application volume for courses. Every now and then you can get little shifts, but they tend to happen a lot more. The trends tend to be quite linear, right, in terms of where a course is going, rather than quite big swings from year to year. So in most cases, the uni has used data, okay, in terms of to make a decision. So you would be able to rely on, right, a guarantee. If you've got the guaranteed ATAR, it's just what they've published for that year that they may they may update based on the prior year's data and the growing popularity, right? They may update the guaranteed ATAR for the next year. So you may find that you're looking at it right now at 96, but maybe by the time that you're in year 12, it might be 96.7 as a guaranteed, for example, just because the demand has driven it up and they don't want to fall into that situation where, yes, they get into a bit of trouble, right? For like discovering that they've got more students for available placements. I'll just share that there so you guys can have a read of it as well.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Cool, good. Any other questions about this before we keep on moving?
Yeah, I have one. So since I live in a rural area, and by the time I finish year 12, that'll be about 6-7 years, I will get my ATAR points, some extra ATAR points. I wonder how they get added on to my ATAR score.
Yeah, cool. So it's partly why you see this here. So see how there's quite a gap here, right? Now that doesn't mean that they actually just accepted someone that got an 88.15 ATAR. That means that in most cases, there was someone that got an 88.15, but then got bonus points of some form. Okay, now those bonus points could have been, rural. They could have been, like you were like national level competitions in something. It could have been the university has the specific bonus points program, where if you get certain marks in a certain subject, they allocate you certain bonus points, or if you live, in a certain area, you get it. So in essence, what it would mean is that, you still need to have your ATAR plus your bonus points basically get as close as possible to the guaranteed cutoff.
But my question is like, are they like one whole point or like part points, like 0.5?
Oh yeah, no, usually they whole points. So, as an example, look, and I don't know about the rule, but I'll just go to HSC bonus points, UNSW. I'll just show you, for example, with UNSW, the adjustment factors they offer. So you can sort of get a sense of what I mean. And this applies equally, so Macquarie do, if you live in a certain catchment area, you get guaranteed 5 bonus points from Macquarie. So if you got an 85, that would take you equivalent for any Macquarie course of an ATAR of 90. So usually they're whole, right? They don't ever really, I haven't really seen ever where you get like a half point. Now, these guys have a slightly different system, right? Here. Now, not all the bonus points apply to all degrees. So at UNSW, just as a quick example, they don't apply to a bunch of these degrees. Now, rural may still, okay, because this is a specific bonus point scheme where rural and like hardship factors are a little different. But for the typical bonus point schemes, they'll only really use them particularly for degrees that are not as popular, and they might want to be trying to drive more student appetite for it, but at the same time not lower the ATAR, the advertised ATAR. Because an advertised ATAR is valuable for a university if it's a little higher, because it creates a little bit of prestige, even though there's no correlation between the ATAR and the course quality. So the uni will want to keep the ATAR as high as possible, but find different backdoor entries to support students coming in so they can fill a program. So the reason UNSW doesn't open it up to any of these is, one, because some of them have like interview processes that are required. And then in a number of cases they do, for that matter, right? And then in other cases, it's because they're just really popular, like really, really popular. And they have an oversupply of students subscribing as first preference for that degree. So they don't need to offer some sort of, bonus point system. But as an example, let's just go to, let's do the business school, because there are a couple of you guys wanting to do commerce. You'll see here, the cutoff for UNSW was 96, right? But with the bonus point system at play, what we're going to actually see here is you can get a whole lot of bonus points. Now you can get usually it's different bonus points volume limits for different universities and courses. Macquarie, I think it's up to 6 bonus points. I think at UNSW it's pretty similar, but you can see that depending on how you go in your subjects, right, you can pick up additional bonus points.
Yeah.
So you might actually discover, right, that, and they're full points, they're not half points. So that 96, you know, for example, if we went back to, where was it? Yeah, yep, the 96, this is Sydney,
Yeah.
where was the UNSW? Here we go, this is the UNSW one, right? All of a sudden, you might have been able to pick up, if we have a look here, let's say you got, you know, a band 6 here, you got a band 6 here, and you got an E2 there, right? That's 5 bonus points. So all of a sudden, you know, for you to get into this course, if you got a 91 plus your 5 bonus points, you're right on the 96 guaranteed cutoff.
So the government ones, like the 5 ATAR points provided by the government to me, by the time I finish HSC, is that like compulsory? They have to count that, or can they dismiss?
Yeah, that's right. No, they won't. They will need to count that one. Yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, no, good question. Anyone this is a little tangent, but I think it's a useful one that we've gone down. Does anyone have any other questions about this?
Yes, I do.
Cool,
I think Sumet and I might have the same question. It's regarding Duke of Edinburgh. How?
Yep, okay.
So I'm doing the silver award this year, and I plan to finish gold next year. How do they add on? I believe it's 3 bonus points. How do they add that on? Is there like certain?
Yeah, that's a
like,
really good question. I don't have the definitive answer for you now. So, Daniel, can we add this to the list of questions to come back to the guys on? My understanding is I don't know if it applies to every course.
Okay.
Yeah, I read like sorry, just cutting in.
No, go for it. Yeah.
They've got like a page where they have like special where they specify what sort of points are added on, and I think it's like different universities added on. So, based on.
And I think that's exactly right. It's because the unis don't need to. Like in the case of, you know, if you live rural, it's a bit of a different story. They actually there's a different funding setup as well that's in place with the government, right? For rural students that are coming into uni. But Duke of Ed, it's more of a voluntary thing that the universities will do and recognize, which is why it's not going to be like a cookie cutter, you know, response where it's like, yep, 3 ATAR points guaranteed wherever. It doesn't work that way. But what it is, I don't know. And that's where, so if you have the link to that page, just to share it even with Drew, that'd be super useful.
I think Aaron linked it in the chat.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Brilliant. Okay. It's already there. Fantastic, guys.
Oh, so it's bonus points by the university. So that wouldn't apply to me.
That's for Duke of Ed. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? I think there was someone else that maybe was going to ask a question as well.
Yeah, I had a question.
Yep.
Is the guaranteed ATAR the same as the other value, or is it guaranteed selection rank?
Yeah, no, they're slightly different. So I think that the thing to be mindful of is the selection rank is actually what the university uses to determine, you know, who gets into the course itself. But you won't ever see that, if that makes sense. Like what you get to see is your ATAR. You won't know your selection rank. So it's why they include it there, because they have to publish it, but it's not as helpful for students in trying to work out, well, where am I at and what do I need to do to get into the course?
Right.
So and you can see, I mean, they're a little distinct, right? Do you know what I mean? In terms of like the numbers are slightly different, right? And that's just because it's what's used to actually determine entry, but and it's correlated, but you just never see it, so you don't need to worry about it.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So if I get like 96 and they add the 5 bonus points, does that put me up at 99.95? Or did they not count it after a level?
Good question. Yeah, it is theoretically possible to get an ATAR over 100 with bonus points, right? Now, in saying that, look, no, it will count. So, you know, I knew students that I did a combined law degree at Sydney Uni. The cutoff was stupidly high. It was 99.6. There were students in my course that had got, you know, a 97 and 98 that came from rural areas that had received bonus points, and that's what enabled them to get into the course, right? So it will contribute. Again, I do want to double check for you just to be like 100% sure. So Daniel, if you can make a note, just to make sure that particularly, you know, if you're living in like a rural or, and by the way, rural, some of you, if, depending on where some of you live, like Arcadia and Galston in Sydney is often considered rural, and you can get, again, one of our team lives in that area, and they got they got bonus points to go to UCIT and to go to Dale Scholars at UCIT off the basis of that. So it's not even as far as we think in terms of Metro Sydney. But Daniel, if you can make a note, I just want to confirm that 100% that will get accepted by all unis. Cool. Any other questions before we keep on moving through?
Yeah. Sorry, another question.
It's good. Go for it.
So you talked about extra units, like an extra unit that you can, you know, hold
A
on,
burn unit, right?
get into certain university courses.
Yep.
How is your ATAR calculated if you have extra units? Is it like your top score for all the subjects, or?
Yeah. So it's your top 10 units, right? So if you've got 12 units, it's only going to take your top 10, and it can mean splitting a subject. So to give you an example, I took 12 units. I took 3 unit maths, 3 unit English, economics, geography, modern history, right? So all up 12. Now I thought 3 unit was, you know, I took 3 unit, even though I knew it was going to be hard because I needed it for economics at uni. And I just assumed it would be one of my 2 units that would just not count, right? Out of my 12, I'd have 10 that would and 2 that wouldn't. 3 unit would be one of them. Now, funny story is that it ended up counting because I surprised myself and did better at it than I anticipated. And so it actually counted for my ATAR. And so it meant that they actually took one of my 2 units, which was geography, and they split it. And so I had a unit counting from 3 unit, and I had 1 unit out of my 2 units. So it's not like that they group the subjects even. They literally just take your 10 best units, and sometimes that'll split subjects that are 2 units, and they'll take 1 unit of that to contribute to your ATAR.
Answer your question, Arian? Arian just posted in the group chat, which I think is also getting at that thing you just explained, Rowan. Does that?
Okay, cool. Let me see if I can just jump into the chat as well, just to make sure. Chat. Let me have a look. Oh, okay. No, they will. So, Arian, yeah. In short, if you're doing it like 2 unit English is compulsory, they will never split 2 unit English. So 2 unit English, standard or advanced, is always going to count. Even if it is not your best unit, it will count. So then you've got to try to, you know, do as well as possible in your other 8, right? That count towards that. But 2 unit always counts, they'll never split it. But they may split your other subjects depending, right? If you've got some extensions in there that you do well at.
I'm a little bit confused about the splitting thing. So say, for example, you take 3 unit maths. How would they split that? Like,
well, because it still stands as 2 units and 1 unit.
Okay. So
even though we think of it as 3, it's 2 and 1. So let's say, let me share, let me see if I can share my screen, guys, and just write this out for you so that I can explain it to you. I'm just going to need to just get my reflector set up again. Just give me a tick. All right, and that's good. All right, now that I'm there, give me a tick. Give me a moment, guys. Let me just... All right, great. So share. All right, so you can see my screen again, hopefully. Yeah. Let me just add a, I haven't even got to scaling yet, guys. That's going to be fun. I want to move on to get there in a tick, though, because I know you're going to have lots of questions about that if we're already going deep right now. So let's say you've got, wrong color. Let me just do a set of subjects. So you've got advanced English, okay, which is worth 2 units. Let's say you've got, let's just say you do advanced maths, 2 unit, you do extension 1 maths, 1 unit. Just put some other subjects down. Chemistry, 2 units. Economics, 2 units. That's what? 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. And then you do, let's say you do, I don't know, let's just put music down. And you're doing 2 units, right? So that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. That's 11 units, right? Mm-hmm. Now, then you're going to take your best 10. So the point being here is that that's compulsory. That's going to be counted regardless for your ATAR, okay? Like locked in. And then let's just say for whatever reason, right? Like this is great, this is great, this is great, right? And we've got this maths question that's, that's appearing for us. So that's 2, 4, 6, 8. So we've got, across these, we've got 8 units locked in. Now, what if though you, for some weird reason did, and this can happen from a scaling point of view, because you might do slightly worse in extension 1 maths as a mark, but your scaled mark is actually higher than advanced because it scales better. And I'll explain more of that in a tick when we get to scaling, right? And so the end outcome of what that can mean is that they might take this one here as your 1 unit, right? Because it's one of your best. And then they'll split this and then they'll just take 1 unit from this. And then that gives us our extra 2 units that we need to get to our total of 10. Does that make sense now, Sumit?
Yeah, but wouldn't you only have 1 mark, like one mark for that advanced math subject?
Yeah, but what they do is you do, right? But then you get a scaled mark and then they just halve that because it's now a 1 unit. So instead of it being, let's say the scaled mark was 80 out of 100 contribution towards your ATAR, it's now going to be 40 out of 50 contribution to your ATAR because they've halved it.
Okay.
Is that making a little more sense?
Okay.
I feel like you're still a little confused.
Okay. Makes a bit more sense.
So is there anything else I can do to explain it?
So advanced maths and extension maths, they're like different subjects, right? They'll both have different assessments and everything.
Yeah, so that's right. Even
All
though they're taught integrated, that's the weird thing. They're taught integrated because of the nature of them, but you still have separate assessments for 2U and 3U.
Okay.
Okay, cool. I can see where you got confused now. Yeah, so you'll have separate marks for each of them.
Right.
Cool. So, any other question? I know we sort of we went a little off track for a moment, but what I maybe want to do really quickly is I just want to hit engineering because I think engineering was the other subject area that some of you guys had put down as a possibility, and it was the last one that I hadn't actually just unpacked. And then I want to keep on moving through our steps, right, in terms of what we want to cover. So, if we look at engineering, I think Sumit, you were thinking about engineering in particular. Is that right?
Yep.
And maybe even a little bit of computer science, I think, from memory.
Yeah.
So let's just take a quick look at, let's just look at a general engineering one that has because you'd probably end up doing a broader engineering to start with and then actually move in. We'll look at computer engineering as well. Like flexible first year. Okay. And then let's just now do really quickly your computer science. Where is our Bachelor of Computer Science? Let's just have a look. So really quickly, if we look at these, engineering, right? Well, that's a really weird page. We've got assumed maths advanced and physics, okay? That's at UNSW. Okay, for civil, if we look at computer engineering, it's where we've got extension 1 and physics as assumed knowledge. And then we've got a huge list of recommended, right? So I think you had IPT down as well. Is that correct? Yeah, cool. Which is great. I think that's a good paired one to do as well. And then if we look at your flexible first year, which is interesting, right? If you do a straight civil, they say like advanced maths is the assumed knowledge. But if you're in flexible first year, because you may end up going into, mechatronics or one of the more complex areas, they're basically saying, look, phys and extension 1. And then if you're going to do bioinformatics, you throw chemistry in as assumed knowledge. Now, are you thinking about 4U?
Maybe, yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. So guys, I want to just keep on moving a little bit. So what I hope you've done from doing this process, actually the final one I wanted to look at was speech pathology. That's the final one. But what I'm hoping you've done as we've been doing this is you've been thinking about, okay, are there anything I need to add, right, to my choices here? possible subjects that I need to take, just because of what, you know, UAC is revealing. And hopefully you've been jumping in and sort of playing around in UAC with me as well, right? Which is my hope. So really quickly, was this Olivia, was it you that was doing speech pathology, or was it Mia?
No, it was me.
Cool, awesome. You've already looked at it, awesome. So you know just English Advanced is for you, Sid, for applied science speech pathology, although depending on whether or not you group it with any psych, it's where you may need to do some advanced maths. Are you planning to take advanced maths at all?
No.
All right, cool. Maybe something to think about, even if it's for term 1 of, you know, year 11, because you can always drop down pretty quickly. Just something to think about. Okay, cool. So guys, that's second step, right? We had a lot of these in here, but I wanted to show you the update data. Step number 3, which hopefully, you know, we've already been sort of having a bit of a conversation about anyway, is to think about, you know, what are your strengths and weaknesses, and not just your strengths and weaknesses in terms of like a broad subject, but to start thinking about, am I really good at learning lots of content? Like, can I smash out and memorize lots of content quickly? Can I write great essays? Like, have I got good essay writing ability? You know, can I just spend hours working on like question after question after question, which is really what 3 and 4U maths require. It's starting to think about those sorts of things, because that then helps define whether or not things are a good fit. For example, am I really organized, and can I get stuff done in advance of time, because then major works are awesome for you. Okay, so what I want you to have a quick go at is in the chat maybe, but also in your notes. I'd love to hear, and I'm just trying to get to the chat, but I've got to find it. I'd love to find out what do you think some of your strengths are, and how that might influence some of your subject choice.
My strengths are math and science, so that's why I've taken, I'm thinking of taking 3 unit and then 4 unit in year 12 for math and physics and chemistry.
Okay, cool. Let's think about though, what are the skills underneath that, right? Which is great. I think it's good you picked some like content areas. The reason I'm saying skills underneath it is that like a lot of the subjects you're going to take next year will be new content. Like if you're doing economics or business studies, it's quite different to commerce in year 10, right? You know, if you're doing phys, chem or bio, you know, it's connected, but it was like one topic that you might have done, you know, in part of your year 10 course. So I want you to just think about underlying, like, what are some of the skills you think you were good at? You know, can you memorize lots of content quickly? Are you good at essays? Are you good at short answer questions, right? Are you super organized and can get, you know, ahead of stuff really quickly? You know, are you really creative, right? Or very musical or artistic? And that's something that you'd like the opportunity to do more creative leaning subjects, right? I'd love you just to put what those are in your workbook and then maybe share. Okay, cool. So that's great for, and is that particularly with abstract stuff, Sumit? Repeating something till I get it right. Okay, cool, Aaron. So that's probably very much, I don't know if you're leaning into sort of the maths side of things, but there's maths and science certainly, but particularly maths has an element of that. Memorizing, Turon. Okay, so in your case, Turon, actually the new science syllabuses are not so great for memorizing, right? They're a lot more about skill application. So for you, something to think about, right, is what's some subjects, at least to have 1 or 2 in your subject mix that involve higher levels of leveraging that memorization ability. Okay, cool. So essays and then creative. So Olivia, are your subject selections then a little bit more lean towards less creative and more, and I think they were, because I think you were leaning into a lot of humanities, right? Okay, interesting. Most things pick up content. Okay, cool. Great. Essay writing for Chloe. Okay, awesome. Okay, great. So guys, now what I want you to do is, as you look at this, I want you to come back and look over the list of subjects you're thinking about and just ask yourself, hey, like, given what I'm possibly got a strength in, okay, what like, have I made sure that I've doubled down on that in my subject choice? Now, I'm just mindful of time, guys. Awesome, Drew. Thanks for sharing as well. So yeah, what subjects were you thinking of taking, Drew? Because that's an interesting mix of.
Yeah. So I guess the memorizing content and essay writing's been really helpful in English and history.
Yeah.
The public speaking's just been a natural thing for me. I went to regionals in year 6.
Yeah, well done.
So thank you.
Cool.
So I guess that ability for me to absorb content and then regurgitate it in my favor has sort of made me lean towards legal studies as a viable option.
Yeah, which is cool. That's a good choice.
Yeah, and
Definitely.
yeah, and I've been doing
modern as
arts
well.
being like my longest hobby in my life.
Cool.
So
Yeah,
I'm
that's
too in to
great.
back out now.
Yeah, cool, awesome. And then is physics then designed to be a little bit of opening options for uni?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool. It sounded that way from looking at it. Okay, cool, good. Awesome. So guys, I want to just cover a couple of key points. One, I want to just help you think about workload and whether or not you take 12 or 13 units, and particularly how to think about that for extension units at the end of year 11. And then 2, I figure that you're going to have a lot of questions around scaling. So I want to spend then the rest of the time we have together today to unpack scaling with you. How does that sound?
Good.
Cool. Great. So, first of all, I'm on page 27, right, in the workbook now, and that's to think about like workload of 12 units and then 13 units. Okay. And I didn't even put 10 units in because 10 units you can't do until year 12, right? So you don't have an option of that. So who's thinking about taking 13 units in year 11 as a starting point?
I don't really know at the moment. I don't know which one would do me better. So, yeah.
I haven't tallied all the subjects, so I'm not really sure.
Cool.
Wait, add on units after year 11, or can you only drop?
No, you can add on as well after year 11. That's right, which is why we need to start thinking about pros and cons, right? Of 12 versus 13 and how we handle it. Okay, so we've got possible, a couple of people. Okay, so I'm just going to dive back across to here, guys, in terms of my iPad. Can you all see the iPad on the screen?
Yep.
Cool. So one of the really big things to think about here is definitely if you were thinking about picking up some extension units in year 12, right? So for example, that could be that you're thinking of taking 4U maths or English. Okay. It could be that you're thinking of taking, the science extension, for example. I mean, they're the main ones that you really pick up as an additional extension. Okay. Now, I think though there's a fair few of you that are thinking about these from like just seeing the subjects. Now, what that means is if you take 12 now in year, and I'm going to sort of maybe not look at explicitly as pros and cons, but we'll unpack it. If you take 12 now in year 11, right? What you've got to think about is if you take 12, then you add 1, right, of these extra extension units, you're then taking possibly 13, okay, here, which is not a bad thing. It gives you a possibility, right, where you could then drop a 2-unit subject that you're not maybe enjoying as much, and then you come down to 11 units and you have a spare up your sleeve. Does that make sense? Okay, so there's some benefit, and you have to go in at least with 12. Now, the thinking though is if you take 13 in, and there is an extra workload, okay, that occurs by doing an extra 13th unit, right, in terms of in year 11. But I think the difference here is if you're year 11, you take 13, you take 1, well, you're now at 14 units, which I wouldn't recommend you take. And to be honest, 13 is probably pushing it in year 12 as well, being really frank. I think you can get away with 13 in year 11. My experience is that students that continue to do 13 in year 12, unless they're super organized, and you may fall into that category, right, which is awesome. Unless you're super organized, it can be quite challenging to maintain 13 in year 12, just because of the pace of assessments you'll get on the workload. So it's where if you take 13, you could drop a 2-unit here. Okay, and now you're on 12 units. Now, what's the benefit of taking 12 in year 12, right, verse 11?
You have 2 units to spare in case like something goes wrong, like
Yeah.
say extension to maths, this flop. That means they won't count.
Yeah, so you have a little bit more wriggle room. You've got a little bit more of a burn, right, up your sleeve. Like you might have an entire unit that you're like, you know what, 2 units, that subject I'm really struggling at, but it's not going to count. Okay, so the challenge here is that what may end up happening is they may end up counting, like they might have to split one of your units and half of a crappy unit counts, right? So it's just something to think about. That's particularly though if you're thinking about taking extension units, right? In, you know, at the end of year 11. If you're not, because not all of you, I think, are necessarily thinking about that, you know, then, you take, if you take 12 now, well, great, you can still drop 1 to 2 and you still end up with 10 to 12 units, right? If you take 13 now, you've probably got even a little bit more wiggle room where you could drop 2 and then you're at 11, right? And you've still got 1 unit to spare and you've dropped. So I think the point I'm trying to highlight is at times there is actually a bit of value for taking 13 in year 11. Because it just enables you to get a little bit more exposure to subjects and then it gives you a little bit more flexibility the next year. I think it's a lot more achievable in a workload perspective in year 11. You've got less assessments, there's less, you know, expectation. Year 12, it starts getting a little challenging. So before we move on and we talk very briefly major works and then finish up on scaling, does anyone have any questions about thinking through the number of units they're going to take for next year?
Not anymore.
Okay, cool, good.
I did originally, like whenever I have thought about it, I have counted it up to 12 or 13, but I didn't actually. I forgot that you could drop a unit or 2 in year 12, so I was thinking, oh, 13 is too much when I was really thinking about year 11.
Yep.
Now
Cool,
I'm a little more clear on it.
Okay, that's good. And I'm just going to see, would you say that doing extension 2 and extension 1 in year 12 is too much on STEM? Okay, cool. So this is good now. These are some questions coming on workload, which is fantastic. So look, every extension unit you take, you should treat it as time allocation of a 2-unit subject. Yes, it's only worth 1, but the difficulty level typically means that you're applying the similar time investment for 2. So I've known students definitely that can do Ariane 4U maths and 3U English. Not that common though. Like most of the time, you know, it's either 3U and 3U, 3U maths, 3U English, or if they've dialed up for 4U English, they've dialed back down to 2U, or vice versa, right? They've dialed up for 4U maths, they've dialed back down to 2, just because you are needing to find, even though you're taking on 1 extra unit, and yes, you're not having to do as much of 2 unit, you know, actually what I probably would say actually is that it's more achievable for maths than it is for English. And the reason for that is, you know, when you do 4-unit maths, you no longer have to take the, because you've already finished the advanced maths course, right? You're no longer sitting the advanced maths assessments or the advanced maths exams. So it does take off that little bit there. Where if you do 4U English, it doesn't matter. You still have to do your 3-unit. You still have to do, your advanced assessments. So it does just add rather than replace.
Oh, so if you take 4-unit maths, you don't have to do the advanced or 3-unit exams? Or
No, you have to do the 3-unit. You have to do the 3-unit, but not the advanced.
Wow. I didn't know that before.
Yeah. So, but that only happens in year 12, right? Year 11, you're still doing advanced and the 3-unit exams. So in answer to your question, Aaron, look, 4U and 3U is more sustainable. 4U maths and 3U English is more sustainable than 4U English and 3U maths. But I would say that's starting to get quite challenging. I did know a student who did it, who was at Sydney Boys, and I know that at the end of the year he did regret it a little. He just did find that it did really get quite difficult, and he felt that he wasn't able to put as much time as he would have liked into either one of them, just because he was needing to split his time. Yeah, okay, so then the other question I was asked is, okay, you could not take extension in year 11, and instead take another subject which would go to 13 and then drop. Yeah, that's exactly what you could do. That's correct. Yes. I think it just depends on, is there another subject that appeals to you? And you know, does extension English during year 11 give you some form of benefit for your essay in imaginative response writing that will flow over to your advanced writing in year 12? Cool, guys. I want to keep on moving because we haven't got to the scaling yet, and I'm mindful that's an important area. Now, I think a couple of you guys were going to take subjects with major works, but I didn't really see a lot of major work subjects actually come through. If you do get questions, let's talk about them in Q&A. I want to jump into scaling, and I want to talk about does it matter and a little bit of how does it work, okay? Now, it matters a little bit, but perhaps not as much as we might think. It's a bit of a complex answer. Now, what I want to highlight is all of the data that we can look at and I'm going to be sharing with you now is actually publicly available. And in your workbook at the top of page 29, I've actually shared the data. I've used 2018 data because it's just what I'd extracted. It's roughly the same. You can actually access the UX scaling report, and I've shared the link for you. And you can actually go and find in that link table A3, which is the table, right, that will reference and show you this data. So I just want to show you how to read this table, okay? Because this is sort of an explanation of how things operate. Now, essentially what the table does is it shows you the course, the number of people who studied the course. It shows you a HSC mark and a scaled mark. Now, the important thing to note is the HSC mark is like the average of your internal and your external marks. So the average of all the internal marks you did, trials and assessments, and your mark that you got in the HSC external exams. Now, moderation has already happened on your internal mark, otherwise moderated up or down, so that they can compare your school with other schools, and we've got like for like. So moderation's already occurred, and we combine it then to create this HSC mark. And then that HSC mark then is then scaled, and that scaled mark is used to calculate your ATAR. So it's why we can see two marks here, a HSC mark, and we can see a scaled mark. Now, what you'll see is that you'll see, you know, quite a big difference between like the HSC mark, right, and then the scaled mark. So for example, the mean HSC mark that a student might get in agriculture, just because it's a good example, is 35.9. Now that's out of 50, by the way, which is what, about 72%, right, in terms of the mean. But the scaled mark that will contribute towards ATAR is 19 out of 50, right, which is, you know, a lot lower, what, 38. And so 38%, sorry. So you can see that, right, the scaled mark, because agriculture is not, again, simplification, not as challenging as a subject, its ability to contribute in a bigger way to your ATAR will be a little less. Now, let's now have a look at what the rest of this column means, because the rest of this actually becomes quite important, right? And what we see is we see max mark. Now, the max mark is what the maximum mark is possible in that course. So the person that comes first in the course, that's the mark that they will receive, right? And that's the max HSC mark, and then that's the max scaled mark that you can get. Now you can see quite a difference, right? You compare ag, right? The max scaled mark, the person who comes first in New South Wales gets 45.5 for that. Whereas the person that comes first in New South Wales for chemistry will get a 50 out of 50, right, towards their ATAR calculation. So you can see that different subjects then start to make a difference. Now, what that shows, though, is that if you're at the top of the course, the impact is less. You're still going to get, because it still shows that you have shown expertise in a certain area, it's still going to highlight that you will still be able to get a very good scaled mark. Maybe not quite as great as if you were at the very top of another course, but relatively, it might be easier for you to come very good in agriculture than it might be for you to be at the very top of the course for chemistry, which means maybe it's a little more likely that you can achieve that. And that's why then we need to look at what those little P figures are. And those little P figures, P99, P90, 75, 50, 25, these are the percentiles. So if you're in P99, you're in the top 1% of the cohort. Right, if you're in P90, you're in the top 10 percentile of the cohort. If you're in P25, unfortunately, you're in the bottom 25 of the cohort. Now, what that shows us is it shows us, first of all, right, the mark that you would be receiving, you know, the HSC mark if you were in the bottom 25 or the top 10% of the cohort. And it also shows you then what that scaled mark would be. So if we look at chemistry, for example, here, you know, if you're in the top 10% of the state, okay, so you're in the top, what, if there's 1,100 people taking it, the top, what, 1,000 or so students, give or take, right? Your, you know, scaled mark contributing to your ATAR would be 42.6. If we compare that to, let's do ancient history for a moment, just as an example, you know, you could be in the top 10% there, and your scaled mark, despite it, you know, the mark being 44.5, which is the same for chemistry, you know, as a HSC mark, your scaled mark would be 38.4. So you can see, right, that chemistry scales better than ancient, doesn't it? Because you're going to get more towards your ATAR calculation. Now, you'll also see that it doesn't scale in a sort of a straightforward fashion. You can see that if you're doing chemistry and you're in the top 25, you're going to get 38.8, but in ancient history now you'll get 31.7. So there's been a bigger drop. There was almost a 7% drop, a 7-mark drop, right, between P90 and P75 for ancient history. But for chemistry, there was maybe a 4-point drop between P90 and P25. So it shows that because chemistry is still harder to do well at, even if you haven't done at the top end, you'll still actually end up getting a scaled mark that's higher. Now, let's go look at the bottom for a moment, because the bottom also becomes pretty interesting here. You can see here, guys, that if I completely flunk chemistry and I'm in the bottom 25% of the cohort, I'm still going to get 25.5 towards my, you know, my ATAR contribution for this subject. Where in ancient, if I'm in the bottom, even though my mark is pretty similar, 33.5 versus 32.5, I'm now going to get only 14.7. So there's a 10-point gap, right? A little bit more than 10 point, 11 almost close to 12-point gap. So there is some scaling implications. Now, before I look at English, the sciences and some of the subjects more specifically, because I've just tried to explain this, does anyone have any questions about how this table works right now?
Yeah, so the bottom is after scaling and the top is what you get. Like if you get 33, then you'll be scaled down to 25. Is that how it works?
That's right. Yes. So what you're picking up, Trin, is that there is in most cases, right, there is some slight scaling down for the calculation of the actual scaled mark contributing towards your ATAR. Yes.
So like all of them scale down. So there are no subjects scale back up.
Well, yeah, in the sense that it's probably not accurate to actually say they scaled down. It's more so that it's the scaled mark that is provided from that course. Perhaps what's better to highlight, right, is that it can be quite difficult to actually, in some subjects, score. And if we actually, if we go and just take a look at the UAC report that I shared with you, UAC report, let's just jump in and I'll have a look at no, that's the prelim report. We don't want the prelim report. What you can actually see here in this report as well, guys, is you can see, let me just jump in and find it. So basically your scale, really simplification, right? Your scaled marks get like aggregated, right? And then once they've aggregated all of your scaled marks together, they then use that, right, to then give you like a rank, because your ATAR, remember, is a rank. It's not like they add up to a 99.95 or whatever, okay? But the point I wanted to just go and highlight here is that we can actually see the number of students that, okay, so this is first of all interesting, right? This shows you for this band, right, basically the percentage of students that took, you know, that got a band 6 to get those ATARs, right? So that can be useful if you're starting to just think a little bit about your subject selection. If you're really wanting to then nail in on like, you're like, I need to get a 99.5 because I'm trying to get into like arts law, for example, at Sydney. That's one thing. The other thing though that I wanted to show you was, here we go. This shows you, okay, the percentage of students that got, that's not quite what I'm after, because that's showing multiple years, but that's relevant for just comparing new and old syllabus. There's a place where you can see in here, guys, the number of students that scored like the different marks. Yeah, it's going to be down here. Cool. Here we go. Okay. Yeah, here you go. This shows the percentage. I'll just make it a little bigger. So if you're in this document that I linked, it's on page 42. Well, 36 here, but 42 up in the, the browser up here. So you can see, right, the percentage of students that will get a band 6 in a subject. So for example, you'll see that, and this might be a little bit weirdly, English standard. Only, like, isn't it easy to do better at English standard? Isn't that the sort of, we talk about that, right? But look how many students got a band 6. 1%. Sorry, I just lost it. 1%. Now, why is that the case? Like, that seems weird, doesn't it? Isn't
it scales down for people in standard?
Well, so this is where I'm getting at. This is where it's a little different, right? While we see that if you can do very well in a subject, like English standard, and I'll show you this, right? Just for a tick, let me show you here. These are the data for English, right? You can see that English standard, if you're in the top 1%, you're getting 40.5. It's still not as great as English advanced, right? 46. Just like top 10 percentile, you're 31.8 versus 41.5, right? For English advanced. So all of a sudden, there's quite a significant benefit. Now, what a lot of students do is they jump into the ATAR calculator and they put English standard and English advanced, and they put in 85 as a mark, and the scaled mark comes back not that dissimilar, right? In terms of going, okay, why don't I just do it? Seems like it'd be easier for me to get an 85 in, standard. I'm just going to drop and I'll do standard, right? But what it doesn't encounter for is the fact, right, that actually, check out that, 48% of students that do English advanced, though, get a band 5. So a band 5, yes, while in theory, a band 5 in both courses may not produce a huge difference in overall scaled mark, weirdly, it's actually sort of, if you're okay in English, easier to get a band 5 in advanced, because they're actually, in standard, the way it's marked ultimately is that they're capping it essentially, right? So there's like, it's very, very difficult for you to be, if you're top 1, then great, you're a band 6, right? And then, if you're maybe the next 10%, you're going to slot into a band 5. And so the idea is that because they're easier subjects, they don't want to have it so that you just, you get a great mark and you get a great scale mark, and why don't you just do all the easier subjects, right? So the critical things you can start to see that, well, actually 48%. So overall, right, you look at that, almost, 93% of the course that do advanced, 92% of the course that do advanced English are going to get a band or an up. They're going to get a 70% plus for English. Okay, which is, if we go back and we look at the contribution then, right, we know that, in terms of where they're scaling, right, they're going to be sitting somewhere in this zone here. But this is this zone here. The crazy thing is that means that for you to get the same equivalent in standard English, right, like you're basically, if you're in the only the top half of advanced English, that's the equivalent of being in the top 10% of English standard, right? But even more scary is you're in the bottom 25 of English advanced. That's equivalent to top 25 of English standard, right? In terms of the scaled mark, 26.4, 26.3. And if we take a look at that, right, for you to be in the top 25%, you're somewhere in here, somewhere in a band 4, right? It's quite challenging, and that means that, the point being here is that it's weird, but there are very significant, particularly for standard advanced, and as we'll see even with the extension, some differences in each of these and what you actually choose to jump in and do. So let's just come back for English for a moment, then I'll look at maths and we'll look at the sciences. I just want to highlight. So if we come back for English just to look at extension, right, equally, it can look like, well, okay, extension does scale better, okay? You know, you can see here that if you're in the top 10, 43.5 versus 41, 40 versus 40, you know, 37.8, 36.7 versus 32. So like overall it is, but if we then go and look at extension 1 English, right, you know, you'll see that, and that's a little strange actually. I don't know why that adds, it's a little strange that they didn't have data here for those two. That feels a little strange for me, that there wasn't anyone in that level there. And same with extension 2. It could just be because the cohort size is really small in terms of the data for the people that sit in that category. But even then, the point being, right, is that, you know, the result is that, you know, you're here, you're in like the band 4 zone right here. That's going to put you still in your top 10%, which will still produce those scaled marks that are considerably higher. So before I move to maths, does anyone have any questions about this?
Yeah. Is the band calculated based on the HSC mark?
Yeah, so this here, in terms of the band, yeah, because they're using the HSC mark here as like the median. So that band is HSC mark because the scaled mark is not it's not considered to be in bands.
Good. I had a question. How do bands work in the sense that is a band 6 like 90% and above in the respective exam, or like what are the measurements?
Yeah, that's right. So a band 6, 90 and above, band 5, 80 and above, band 4, 70 and above, you know, band 3, 60 and above, band 2, 50 and above. Now, it's a little different for the extension units. They call it, you know, actually, that's the reason why. E4 is actually the top. So E4 is like a band 5 equivalent, and E3, I was like, oh, well, how did I forget that? And so that's like the equivalent of like top. So it shows that 34% of students that do extension English actually do get 90% and above. And it shows that crazily 94% of students that do English extension will get a band like 80% and above in their marks. So coming back to that, right, it means that, you know, you end up, the challenge is, right, you know, it still depends on where you sit in terms of the percentile, in terms of your scaled mark to contribute to your ATAR. But it does just show that in some respects, while on paper it looks like an easier subject is easier to do well, that's not necessarily true. Now, it's still true that you can. It's just if you're doing a subject that's a little easier and you're worried about the scaling implication, it just means that you need to basically be like top of your school and try to push for, you know, as far as top of the state or as close as you can. For example, you know, I interviewed a student that got a 90, you know, close to a 99 ATAR that did standard English. In saying that, she also got a state rank for standard English, right? So it had a quite positive contribution to her ATAR because it was still giving her a strong, you know, a scaled contribution. So, any other questions about, I know we're a little over time, but I want to just answer these questions for you before we wrap up for today and we sort of pull it together. Any other questions about English before I quickly look at maths and the sciences and then do a bit of an overview table? Cool. Let's look at maths. Now, maths is not that dissimilar, guys. It's not as stark as English, you know, because we can see here that in maths, in English, remember, you know, bottom 25 here was equivalent to top 25, where for maths, bottom 25 is not quite equivalent. You get a little bit more if you're in the top 25 in standard. And this is, again, the same thing. On the face of it, you do standard maths and it looks like you put into the ATAR calculators and it does contribute and it looks pretty nice. You know, that you get 85 in standard, you get, you know, 80 in advanced, and the scaled marks look pretty similar. But it's why, once again, we'd want to have a look here and we can see standard maths 2, right? Only 5% get a band 6. It's not as bad. 19% do get a band 5. okay, which is good. So if you were in the sort of top 10% of the cohort, you would be somewhere close to a high band 5, okay, which would then pull you in to get somewhere around the 36.7, okay, as a scaled mark. That is a bit of a drop though, if you were, but note, even if you're in the top 25 for advanced, you'd still be ahead. So even if in advanced, you were, and you'll see, right, top 25 is a band 5, like, because top 24% of students get a band 6. So you'd be a band 5 anyway as equivalent. So that might be the difference between getting like, an 80 versus like an 89. You still come out ahead, and you could probably get away with doing a band 4 in advanced, and that would be equivalent or better than a high band 5, even an edge band 6 for standard based on the data. So there is, to some extent, now this only really applies if at the end of the day, you really need to optimize ATAR for the last little nth degree, because you're looking at some really high ATAR courses, and maybe there's not a whole lot of bonus points available for the university that you can get into. I'm mindful that some of you guys, this might just be like, well, too much, not necessary for you. Okay, so just want to flag that. So, my take on this, guys, is right now is like, look, there are some implications. It makes sense if you can. It's sort of counterintuitive. If you think that you could do standard and knock it out of the park, you do standard, because then you're more likely to maybe be that 1% or that 11%, right, that's going to be up in the higher sort of band 5, band 6, which will then give you still a decent contribution to ATAR. It's almost though, if you actually suck at English, it's sort of weird, because it almost makes more sense to do advanced, because even if you suck at it and you're in the bottom 25, your scaled mark ends up being higher. Sort of a little bit weird. Now, the only thing to factor in is that you might get so disillusioned because advanced is just killing you that it just causes sort of mental health challenges, and we don't want that to happen. And that's where there can be some benefit in sort of just saying, you know what, scaling be damned, I need to do standard because actually it's better for me. It means that I'm in a more positive frame of mind, I'm more confident, and I'm going to do better in my other subjects. And that's really important as well. I can't underestimate the power of that. Now, for maths, it does show that if you can try to do advanced, we recommend it. One, because of all of the university prereqs and assumed knowledge that open up for you if you can do it. And two, again, it's just going to give you a little bit more of a benefit in terms of your overall ATAR, particularly if you're aiming for a high ATAR course. If you're not aiming for a high ATAR course, then I wouldn't stress too much. And if you know that you don't need to do a uni degree that relates to maths as a prereq. Now, what's the overall sort of, I've basically gone through, and what I've done, guys, one of the ways to think about order of scaling is to actually look at the P25. You look at what happens if you absolutely bomb the subject, and you look at the scaled mark there, and that gives you a nice clear indication of how effective or how much this will still scale for you if you absolutely screw it up. And that helps you get a rank, right? A rank order, roughly, of subjects that scale better or worse. And so we can see that here. I've done this as a rank order, and these have changed a tiny bit. I did this not on 2018 data, because that's what I had available at the time. And you can see a little bit of an order. Now, note, some of this is also, though, based on the fact that there's very few people that take a course. And so as a result, there's very little data, and the few people that do take it do very well, which is often why you'll see like a language extension and continuous subjects do very well from a scaling point of view. So you can see here that there's a bit of an order, right? Maths extension up the top. And this is even if you've bombed it, right? If you bombed it and you're in the bottom 25, you're still getting 42.2. Pretty ridiculous, right? So we can see, we've got maths extension, then we've got English extension 1 and 2, history extensions up there, music, all of the extensions, right, to be expected are up the top. You then have advanced, chem, maths 2 unit, echo, phys, okay? Studies of religion 1 actually does surprisingly well. A lot of students think, but surprisingly from a scaled point of view. And then we have bio, modern, business, ancient, PD, English, general maths. And then we have, you might have CAFs and community studies and so forth in there. Now, the point of all of this is that I know I haven't covered all your subjects, but it's why I've tried to show you guys how you can find it here. Okay, so you can go and take a look, right? And you can read it and go, okay, actually, well, the PDHPE, where does that sit? Okay, well, if I really screwed this up, that's a good indication. It's not amazing. Sorry, that's the percent. That's the wrong one to look at. A3 table. Let me go to the A3. It's the next table. Not that one. This one, right? So you might go down to the subjects that I haven't covered, right? Like legal, and you'd have a look and be like, oh, okay, that's where legal is. Okay, what about, PDHPE? Okay, that's PD. And basically you'll see that there's really like 3 tiers of subjects: top tier, mid tier, low tier of scaling. Right? And so if we go back, we can sort of see, right, that this first half here, almost like the sort of 25 or 26 and above is like your top tier. Then you've got like a 15 to 25, right? That's like your mid tier. And then you've got 15 and below, which is your bottom tier. Now, again, this isn't to say that you shouldn't take a subject if it's in bottom tier, right? Because remember, if you love it, you're going to do better at it. You're going to work harder at it. You're going to enjoy it. If it plays to your strength, you're going to do better. And know that you can still do well with a low scaling subject. You just need to do very well at it. That's all, right? In terms of ATAR contribution. And it's why sometimes students get confused, because they say, I got my HSC marks back, and I got like 70s, I got 80s, I got a band 6 for something. But my ATAR sucked. Like, what went wrong? You know, like my marks don't seem to reflect my ATAR. And when that happens, it's because the subjects they took didn't necessarily scale all that well, which meant that their ATAR wasn't as high. But if they had done really well in those subjects because they loved them and excelled, they would have still been able to get a high ATAR. And that's what I want to really stress for you guys. Really, really important. So I just want to sort of bring it home now, and then I'll open up to some questions, right? What I want you to think through so that you can finalize your subject list is I want you to, 1, make sure that you've got that list of all of the subjects that you're passionate about, right? Secondly, throw in onto that list any subjects that you might need for university, which we've hopefully unpacked. Third, identify, is there any there that you need to really double down on a little more, like essay writing or calc-based or something because of the fact that you're just good at it and you want to do well. Right. Fourth, are you going to take that 12th or 13th unit? Okay. How are you going to think about that? All right. That's going to be really important just in terms of thinking about, do you have burn units up your sleeve? Do you have time for, adding on that extension unit so you can drop 2 units? And then finally, look at all those subjects that you're left with. Look at, are there any that you're tossing up and you're really not sure about, eco, business, modern or not? And then look at scaling. Standard versus advanced, and then use scaling to define that decision to go, actually, you know what, toss away, if it's eco business, I'll take eco over business, right? Or if it's, chem versus, I don't know, something else, I'll take chem, right? At that point, then use scaling to factor in to your decision. So guys, I'm just mindful of time. I know we've gone a little longer, 15 minutes over. I want to just open up now to any questions that you might have from what I've shared. It could be about scaling, it could be about earlier stuff, it could be specifically about one of your subjects, just so that we can answer them, so that you can leave here and go, great, I now know what I'm going to do. Awesome. So Drew, I think you have a question.
Yes. So my school's subject selection is, we've been told it's within the first 2 weeks of next term, or the coming term.
Yep. Okay.
And I think I heard a joke being passed around before, but I want to hear your legitimate opinion on legal studies, because you took it.
Well, I didn't take it in high school. I did take it at uni, but
okay.
My sister is a legal studies teacher.
Okay.
Honestly, legal's, look, it depends on why you're doing it. Okay. Like legal is an enjoyable subject. If you're interested in going, you think you're interested in law, you're interested in, politics. It is interesting. Okay. You're going to learn a lot about just how our legal system works. And that's going to be really useful. Do you need to do it to study a law degree? Definitely not. Nothing that you'll really do will be particularly directly, like you'll have a little bit more of an understanding of the terminology when you get into law school. When they talk about, where to find an act or how to do something, you might already know it, but you actually get taught all of that from scratch anyway, if you're doing a law degree. So there's no prereq. It's purely something that I think you would do if you enjoy it. Now, if, it's very essay based as well, right? So the more that you, the more that you feel comfortable writing essays and memorizing content, it's like very memorization heavy, the better you'll do in it as well. Yeah.
Okay. And just to add on to that then, if law degrees don't have any prereqs, then could I just sort of play it a bit more tactical and choose a subject that I'm also good at, just to broaden my options? That way I can do law because it doesn't have a prereq, or I can
Yeah,
do a full
definitely.
tech.
Definitely. If you know you don't need to, yes, you could be more tactical. You could be tactical in two ways. And this is for everyone that has a high ATAR goal and maybe there's only one course that's a prerequisite, like even med for chemistry, for example. Basically, you could play it very tactically, and you almost will need to a little when you get into the tail end of like a 99 plus cutoff, because I know one of our students last year, Annika, she's a Pathfinder mentor as well now. She wanted to get into law school. She got, I think the cutoff was 99.5 at UC. After everything she did, she got 99.4. And if you don't get the guaranteed cutoff, you're not in for law, right? Like, it's just that strict because it's that popular. So it can be painful like that, right? So yeah, you could be strategic, one, in either picking a subject that scales quite well, that you think you can do well at because it'll contribute more effectively to your ATAR. Or two, yeah, you could just pick a subject that you'll enjoy, that because you enjoy it, if you really put the work in, you think you can do really well. And that'll also help on ATAR, but B, also expose your options because you're not needing to worry about, additional prereqs.
I have a question about IPT. I don't know what that stands for. Good.
Yep, cool. So information processes and technology from memory.
Yeah. And is IT pretty similar to that? I take that in year 10.
Yeah, cool. Daniel, did you do IPT or did you do SD&D?
I did IPT.
Cool.
I actually, I think it was a subject I dropped, going back a while now. I dropped it in the start of year 12 after doing the preliminary course. And I think there'll be somebody else here who is looking at doing IPT as well.
I think Sumed is, yeah.
Sumed, yeah. Basically, it's a very theoretical look at computers. I don't know how much that overlaps with the IT course for year 9 and 10, because I did not do that. But it's a lot of looking at like breaking down the way that computers use logic. And it's also looking at things like making a database. So you can understand how to type in search queries and things like that. You'll probably do a project that involves making a database or a system of some kind.
Yeah.
Cool. So I know there was a question in the chat. I just want to try to answer that. Is it true that higher marks percentile you get, the less difference scaling makes between courses? Yes, that is true, Ariane. But remember that it's harder to actually counterintuitively get higher marks in sub-subjects because they're capped, right? So in theory, right, if you put in a 95 in advanced and a 95 in standard, right, the scaled marks don't come out all that different, but like only 1% of people will get that mark in standard, where there's a much higher percentage of people that will actually get it in advanced. So yes, that's why though, the point being is that if you excel at any subject, even if the scaling doesn't matter, you can still do very well from a scaled mark perspective in contribution to your ATAR. I think that's a really important message.
Question, if that's okay. In regarding reserves, how would you strategically put subjects down for reserves? Because I think I'll have 12 units. And so if one of them is kicked out inside of the 10 units that I want to be quite high scaling, should I put like as the number one reserve another high scaling subject? Or how do you think I should approach the reserves in case I don't get my subject?
Yeah, good question. How should you approach the reserves? And that's going to be for, I guess, a number of you is going to be the case as well, right? Yeah, it's tricky, right? I think the danger of, if it's a reserve, right, the likelihood is that you would probably, if you get it, you would probably drop it, right?
Most likely, yeah. Would you say it's unlikely for you to not get all of your subjects if you've chosen subjects that are quite safe, like like chemistry, economics that probably aren't
Yeah,
are going to
it'll
meet.
depend on the size of your school, right? Yes, in most cases, if you've taken more of the mainstream choices, it shouldn't be a problem because they should have aligned there to be no clashes or there's multiple classes. I think the difficulty is if your school's a little smaller and you don't have multiple classes for some of them, there may end up being timetabling clashes, and that's where the issue can occur. So I think it really is an equation of how big your school is, actually, and that tends to be a big driver of the degree of like timetabling clash that may emerge. In most cases, you know, your reserves may be something that you drop. So you could either take a high scaling subject just to give it a crack, just to see how you go, and it's about stretching yourself for year 11 and then you drop it. Or honestly, you could just take a subject that you think will be fun and it's just designed so that you don't really have to worry about it in year 11 and you're just taking it as a carry unit so that you can drop it in year 12. So I think you could go on either side of the spectrum there, and it just depends on what objective you want to have for year 11.
I guess for me, it's important which subject I'm not able to do, because
Yeah.
like if I'm not able to do modern history, which is kind of my lower scaling subject, my other ones are quite high scaling, then I would want a subject that is also low scaling. But if I lose chemistry, like that would pretty much be like the end of the world for me. So I wouldn't want to put
Yeah.
in lower.
And I think that way, you know, I don't think you would lose Chem, but even if you did, I think it would be more that you'd be able to have a conversation with them to say, look, actually, I really need Chem. What was the conflict? Oh, the conflict was with this other subject I picked. Maybe I'll tag out the other subject and keep chemistry in the mix.
Yeah.
So don't always take the you know, if you guys do get like some pushback, right? Like, sorry, you can't have that. Don't always take that as an answer, right? Like push back and have a conversation about like, okay, well, why was there not enough students for a class? Was there a clash? If there was a clash, what did it clash with? Okay, so that you can work out, do I want to actually change it and take this subject, not the other, right? That's clashing with. And then if there is a way that I can't do it at this school, can I do it by distance ed? Is there another solution to this? Is also the other pathway if you really want to take a certain subject. So don't always just take the upfront no as your schools will often do their best to try to fit you in, but equally, you know, the timetabling unit at your school is trying to sort this out for however many people are in your grade, right? It's a really complex challenge. And so unless you're, you know, having that conversation and pushing back, you may not always get the best outcome. So be okay to come back and have that convo.
Yeah, I have a question with one of mine. So mine is a pretty small school, and often like some of the rarer ones, like economics, you only have one person in that class, and that's distant ed, and then other ones like you'll have two in chemistry. So
yeah, that's right.
With the scaling, does it affect like your class average, or is it your school average, or is it the like year group, like everyone in the state average?
So yeah, the scaling is different. So there's two things that we're talking about here. There's something called moderation, and there's something called scaling. What you're actually asking about, Aaron, Tarun, is actually like moderation. Moderation happens with your internal marks at school. And so, you know, your school with 2 students, right, for example, maybe, you know, your teachers give you 95% because they just love your work, right? Well, how does that compare internally for another school that has 100 students in the same class and the average mark is 60%, right? You know, we need to find a way to compare apples for apples here. And so that's what happens with moderation. And that moderation, therefore, then occurs based on really, 1, your rank internally at your school, and 2, how your cohort performs, you know, in the HSC. Now, the challenge with that is that in a small cohort, that could be a really good thing. It could be a really bad thing. So the good thing could be that you're going to rank first or second. So great, you know, you have on paper a good rank. And the good or bad thing is the cohort, if it's small, might be actually really good. So they may do really well in the external HSC exams, which will cause a decent level of moderation to occur. The bad part is you could be stuck with another student that freaking hates the subject and has to take it, and they suck and they do really poorly. And that's going to pull, because there's only 2 of you, that's going to massively then pull your cohort performance down. and it'll therefore really minimize the amount of moderation that'll happen on your internal marks that are then used, remember, to average out to create your overall HSC mark. Now, note that moderation only happens for that 50% of your internal. So the bigger the school, the good thing is you could have lots of people that are not doing very well, but you could also have a bigger cohort of people that are motivated and trying. And so there's just slightly less risk. It's just diversification ultimately, right? You've sort of diversified the risk. So there's pros and cons for you. It really depends on who else is doing it at your school and how switched on they are.
Yeah, and my second question is, so like with distance education, how does that work? So with moderation for that, do they take it about your entire distance education class, or is it, I don't understand.
Yeah, I'm not entirely, that's another good question, Daniel. If you could make a note so we can research that. I'm not entirely sure. I believe that it's still your class at school, because I believe while you are doing distance ed, right, you know, you're still enrolled as part of your school, right? It's just you're getting support from distance ed.
Yeah.
So I think it's still your cohort at school, but
I
want to
wouldn't
double
have a
check.
cohort. I wouldn't have a cohort. It'd just be me.
Well, yeah,
Like
that's right. Well, then
current
that's not a bad thing if you know you're going to do well, right?
Oh, okay. So it wouldn't affect it if I'm the only one there.
If you're the only one, it's less of an impact. If there's, you know, a couple of others and they're not very good, well, then it can have a more significant impact. Yes.
That makes much more sense. Thank you.
Cool. Well, good. I can probably answer. I've just got to jump off in a tick, guys. Just as much as I'd love to answer all your questions. Daniel might be able to answer some more afterwards. But maybe I can take one more question for now, just before we wrap up for today. Does anyone have another question they'd like to ask?
I had a question about like the different subjects and assessments, like different units. So for 3-unit maths in year 11, you have to do like 2-unit assessment, extra 1-unit assessment. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
And then for 4-unit maths in year 12, you only do 4-unit assessment, or is it?
You do a 4-unit and a 3-unit.
And a 3-unit. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that the same for English, or?
No, English is different. You will do a 2-unit, you will do a 3-unit, and you will do a 4-unit. And if you do 4-unit, you have to do all the. So that's why English is a little more challenging.
Okay, so English is all stacked. Like it's.
Yeah,
you do
that's right.
3-unit, you have to do 2-unit plus 1-unit, and if
that's right. Yeah, you do.
2 and 1.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool, guys. It's been awesome catching up with you all. Hopefully that's been I'm hoping there's been lots of takeaways. I'll ask Daniel if you could do the wrap up with the one major takeout, one big learning. That'd be amazing. Guys, I've got to jump just in to catch up and support a student. I'm at the moment, so I'm going to jump in and I've got that here. But if you do get more questions as well, you know, by all means, please, you know, shoot them through to Daniel or myself, leave them on the Facebook group. Hopefully now that you'll be added to it if you haven't already, and you can click the link. I hope this has helped you just get hopefully, I think a lot of you guys were on top of it. Maybe it's just really clarified a couple of things around subjects. And also I think we spent a fair bit of time, which has been great, just talking about what year 11 and 12 is going to look, right? In terms of the subjects and the assessment types and how it all plays out. So if you do get more questions, let us know. But otherwise, I'll let Daniel just wrap up and I will see you guys at our next workshop.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No worries.
Thanks,
See you guys.
Really helpful.
Cool. Good to hear.
All right, everyone. We will wrap up as quickly as we can. But before we do, we're really big here on trying to make sure we can translate all of the ideas that we've discussed into like a takeaway that will actually stay with you afterwards. So please share in the group chat one big thing you have taken away from the session that we had today. It can be something big, like it's completely changed how you look at your subject selection, or it could be something really small. Maybe it's just reinforced a direction you were already going in, or anything like that. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks, Taryn. How moderation works, absolutely how it's different to scaling as well. It's excellent. Yep. How scaling and subjects work. Thanks, Olivia from Drew. The balance between workload and choosing from passion. Yeah, I think a big underrated thing. Many people, I think, jump in just thinking, how can I play the strategic game? But it's easy to underrate what it's actually going to be like to carry the workload. From Mia, the scaling of subjects, excellent. From Aryan, how scaling works and how it can affect the ATAR. Yep. Oh, sorry, that was a crazy high maths extension 2 scales. Yes. From Chloe, how scaling works and affecting the ATAR. Great. Fantastic. And from Sumed, understanding how scaling changes depending on the difficulty of the subjects. Yep. From Aryan, scaling has become much more clear and opened up more opportunities for subjects. Excellent. Those are fabulous takeaways. I'm so pleased that we've all got something we can carry ourselves out with. Are there any last minute questions anybody has had burning away that I can try to help? I may not have all the answers, but I'll do my best. Mia, do you have a question at all?
No.
Nope. Okay. No, it's just lighting up for no reason. All good. If you do come up with questions, I've put the email addresses for Rowan and me into the group chat there. Also, if there's anything in this session that you wanted to look back at, you would have seen in the chat as well. I shared the link to the YouTube playlist where we save and upload all of the past sessions. So you can go there now if you wanted to look at any previous workshops that we've done so far this year, or in the next couple of days, we'll get the recording of this session up, and then you can just take another look at anything that was covered there. For example, where to find those scanning documents online if you wanted to dig deeper into the way your subject is affected or anything like that. Also, I believe we are now all in the Facebook group. I posted the link earlier. The link is also saved in the email that was sent where you got allocated to your mentor. So please, if you have questions, just post them in the Facebook group as well, because often others will have some thoughts or others have been wondering the same thing, and then everyone can benefit from having the answer shared in one place. Any last minute questions, comments, thoughts?
About the mentor,
yep.
Is it fine if we just contact them directly and then we have that, we talk to them, or do we have to do like those sessions?
Yeah, great question. So in year 10, you get 4 one-hour mentor sessions, and you and your mentor can schedule those between you when they're convenient for both of you. And that might mean you spread them out a whole lot. It might mean that they're more condensed. It's up to you. But in between times, we don't have a hard and fast rule on the level of contact between you and your mentor. Just like we don't have one for people who get tutoring from Smart either. We just ask everyone to be kind of reasonable. Mentors are working adults who have lives too, so they probably won't be able to respond if you're sending them lots of stuff or call them every day. At the same time, it's not meant to be set and forget, where they just see you for those 4 hours and then you never see or hear from them ever again. So if you have questions in between times, by all means, message them, email them, to ask your mentor what channel is best, how they can best be contacted, and what their availability is like. All our mentors are just absolutely driven by wanting to support you as much as they can this year. So if there's any support they can give you in between times, answering questions, having a quick phone call, they will all do everything they can to offer you that support in between your mentor sessions too. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Any other questions anyone had about stuff going straight? Yeah, Taryn.
So with the our extension classes, are they usually placed like during school times or after school times, or does that vary depending on the school?
So you mean subjects like extension maths or extension English?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it does vary by school, but something like extension maths is almost always done as part of regular maths classes. So if you're in an extension 1 math class, you'll probably also be doing 2 units with that class as well. Sometimes schools can't accommodate a subject in the normal timetable, so it is not uncommon for people to have an extension class before school hours or after school hours. I don't know what the deal will be with your particular school. But if you have seen some year 11s or 12s having to rock up early or leave school late before, there's a good chance that that was because they were doing a subject that had to be accommodated that way.
Yeah.
That said, sometimes that just happens with other subjects too. Sometimes it'll be geography that draws a short straw, and they're like, well, we've got only 4 kids who want to do geography, so they're going to see you at 5 o'clock Thursdays, guys. Like,
yeah,
just see how it goes. Cool. Great question. Any other questions anyone had? No, well, you have all been wonderful today. Thanks for engaging so much and having so many great questions with Rowan during the session. As I said, if you have any more, hit me up later on using the contact channels, and we'll see you all again soon. Good luck as you head into term 3 this year. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks, Daniel.
See y'all.
Yeah.